Wolf Pack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with our weekly best ball draft. Stoked that it is best ball mania season, Christmas morning, baby. But as always, we have a pre-draft topic. We'd like to discuss the 2024 rookie class winners and losers based on their landing spot. And we are focused on just redraft. I want to make sure to reiterate that throughout the show. This is not a dynasty focused show on this episode. We can and will break down their dynasty prospects, but there are certain guys, Ricky Purcell, for instance, that right now don't look great for 2024, but awesome for that long-term outlook. So we are going to be focused strictly on 2024 values, who won, who lost based on where they landed. We'll break that down in about 30 minutes or so, and then it's on to our first, cannot wait to fire it off, our first Best Ball Mania draft of the year. My man Mo, how are we feeling today?
I mean, like you said, it's basically Christmas morning for guys like us. Gotta break down a little bit on the draft before we get into it. But I mean, happy as I ever could be with a BBM 5 opening up, and I'm just ready to get the first one underway. I think you and I will be cracking the seal together on the BBM drafts. So I don't think either of us have gotten one off yet. I mean, it's only been open for 3 hours at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, get the first one under the belt and get the best ball summer rolling.
Absolutely. We'll get it rolling. Let's talk about some of these rookies, breaking down again their redraft value strictly for 2024. Winners, neutral, and losers at the quarterback position. We'll start with winners, and you have to highlight Caleb Williams at the top. First overall pick, as he should be. All the hype, the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. Would have been an immediate win regardless of what the Bears did the rest of the draft. But then, just given because you had DJ Moore and Keenan Allen already there, then they go and pick 9 and select Rome Odunze, making this, in my opinion, the best trio of wide receivers in the NFL right from the jump. If Rome is as good as everybody, including myself, believes that he is. They also get some tackle help in round 3, a really sturdy guy out of Yale there. To me, Caleb Williams comes away as the single biggest quarterback winner, walking into a situation that you very rarely see this just beautiful for the number 1 overall pick. I don't see how, if he's as good as everyone thinks he is, that he could fail in this type of landing spot. Immediately, my QB 12 in redraft. I love the spot for him. What do you think about Caleb Williams landing with the Bears?
Yeah, I think it's a storyline that's going to be talked about for the coming weeks, months. I don't think we've ever seen a number 1 pick land in a situation like this. I mean, personally, I look back to Joe Burrow and the last couple of years landing with my Bengals, but he was there with just T. Higgins and some dust. But now we see Caleb Williams landing in a spot with 3 legitimate, very high-end wide receivers. DJ Moore, a guy that people have liked for years, finally came out of his shell last year. Keenan Allen, established veteran who's been a target hog and just an all-around producer for years in Los Angeles, coming over to Chicago now. And yeah, like you said, Rome Odunze, he was the all greened out reception perception profile from Matt Harmon. I mean, a lot of people really excited about this guy. And I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, we saw the production in Washington last year. There's nothing not to like about the situation that Caleb Williams is walking into. And unless he is just a generational bust, like you said, I think he's set up to succeed. And I think your price of quarterback 12 is pretty fair. I mean, I think that's right around where most people are going to have him. And I don't see any qualms with that. And But the other guy that I'm arguably more excited about in terms of their situation and landing spot, you can go back and forth all day, but I love the spot that J.J. McCarthy landed in. I mean, he got the arguably, I don't think many people would come back at you with this, that it's the Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the NFL. I mean, there's some debate to be had, but in my opinion, he's firmly the best receiver in the NFL. You've got Jordan Addison, a dynamic, emerging young guy. I mean, he showed flash in his first year, especially as a deep threat. I mean, he grabbed a couple of bombs from Kirk Cousins. And then T.J. Hawkinson, don't think he's going to be ready for week 1, but he's going to be available for the majority of the season. And then you've got the offensive scheme in Minnesota that's setting up J.J. McCarthy for success. I mean, Kevin O'Connell, he's over the last year, especially last year, he made something out of nothing more than once. He did it with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs. Both, and he wasn't afraid to let the rock fly with both those guys. I mean, he just understands that this offense flows through Justin Jefferson regardless of who's at quarterback. Last year, we saw both Mullins and Josh Dobbs attempt 35 passes in games, with Justin Jefferson reaping the most rewards from those attempts. And we saw Nick Mullins crack 350 yards twice. And I believe both those games were against the Lions secondary. We've talked a little bit about them being and they added on, the Lions secondary added on in this draft, but we've talked about them being an attackable secondary, especially last year, but that's beside the point. I want to say the same thing about JJ McCarthy that I do for Caleb Williams. It just, unless he is a generational bust of a prospect and everyone is overvaluing his traits as a quarterback, there's just not really a way for this guy to fail. He's got a coach who's not afraid to sling the rock, an offensive scheme that's propped up multiple significantly worse quarterbacks, and he's got some of the best weapons in the NFL. I mean, I see Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy kind of on the same plane in terms of how the situation that they're entering in. I think Caleb Williams will go much further ahead of JJ McCarthy in fantasy drafts, as he should. But in terms of the situation and how they're set up to succeed, I think these are both smash landing spots. What do you think about McCarthy, though?
Yeah, I actually have JJ. I have JJ McCarthy as my QB 23 right now. That's 7 spots above the ECR in terms of best ball drafting right now. So I absolutely agree. A complete smash, an A+ landing spot here for him. And now next up on the list, another winner in my opinion, not quite to the level of Caleb Williams or JJ McCarthy. Again, those were A+ in terms of weapons scheme, but Jaden Daniels also landing in a really, really good spot. Now I want to make sure that I preface this too. Just because I gave an A+ to McCarthy's landing spot and I give Jaden Daniels a B+ or so, I still would rather have Jaden Daniels in fantasy. In fact, he's my quarterback 13, just behind Caleb Williams, another 5 spots above the ECR there, because I really do like this landing spot, just not quite as good as the others. Still though, McLaurin, Dotson, they add Ben Sinnott, who we're going to talk about later, an athletic freak at tight end, Austin Eckler, a generational pass-catching back, if he can regain some of that explosiveness we've seen over the years. And then you talked about play calling as a big factor. Kingsbury had some very solid offenses over there in Arizona. Kyler was consistently hovering around that QB7 or so range in average for those 4 seasons. Quarterback 15, quarterback 6, quarterback 5, and quarterback 10 was 20 or more fantasy points per game in 3 of those 4 seasons as well, and had at least 418 rush yards. That's what I really get excited about, was that Kyler Murray loved to take it off. They kind of open the offense up, so then it opens up. If there's nobody open downfield, there's huge rushing gaps. And Jaden Daniels is 10 times the rusher that Kyler Murray is. As fast as Murray is, Daniels is like a legit running back at times with that ball in his hand. So I am stoked to see. I mean, the fact that Kyler Murray had an 819 rush yard, 11 rushing touchdown season at his tiny, minuscule size gets me jazzed up for the way Jaden Daniels could be used. So good weapons, good scheme with a lot of designed rush attempts as well. I don't see much to not like here. The only kind of, when you have a defensive head coach in terms of, who's the guy? Freaking Quinn, Dan Quinn, the head coach there. It's just sometimes they like to pound the rock, and they do have 2 really good running backs. And I could see them protecting Daniels a little bit in that early part of the year. But still, I think he's going to run the ball a ton, and he's got great weapons to throw it to. So this was a winning of a landing spot, in my opinion. He could have ended up falling to the Patriots, and we're going to talk about them in a second with Drake May. I like this spot for Jaden Daniels a lot, though.
I think it's a great spot. I mean, just as long as they allow him to do what he does with the ball in his hands in the open field as a rusher, I think from a fantasy perspective, he's gonna produce almost no matter what. We talked about it a little bit last off season, but guys like Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts have all been relevant fantasy quarterbacks with very little passing production, just relying on their legs to produce in fantasy. And Jaden Daniels is obviously the best, most dynamic rushing quarterback out of this draft class. Not the best landing spot in Washington, but like you said, it's not, that's not to mean that he's a lower, we're ranking him lower than JJ McCarthy. I still think Jaden Daniels is an arm and a leg ahead of JJ McCarthy in terms of what he can do as a fantasy producer. So I really like Jaden Daniels from a rushing perspective to produce. And if they allow him, and I understand the fact that they might want to protect him. I mean, we saw some of those clips of him just getting absolutely lit up last year at LSU. And he's no Josh Allen, like battering ram build. He's the quick, elusive, kind of a little skinnier in terms of his frame. So there's some reason to believe that they're going to want to prioritize his health and safety and not let him run completely buck wild. But he has the skills to produce and be a dominant rusher. And as long as he does that, he's going to be a top 15, I don't know about top 15, top 18 fantasy quarterback, as long as he's able to do what he does on the ground. And with the weapons that we talked about around him, the Terry McLaurin, the opinions are mixed on Jahan Dotson. I still haven't fully given up hope on Jahan Dotson, but the weapons are there. They're not completely dust like we've seen in some other spots for some rookie quarterbacks. So as long as he can produce on the ground, and then we have some pluses from some solid passing production games out of Jaden Daniels, I think he's going to be an all-around fine fantasy quarterback and will be relevant in single quarterback leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only a handful more quarterbacks that are really relevant. Spencer Rattler going so late that we're not going to dive into him, but all the big six going in round one, we did want to quickly touch upon. And I do consider Bo Nix, again, not quite as good of a landing spot as the others, but Sean Payton's offense has been prolific in the past when Drew Brees was at his best. I mean, he was breaking fantasy year in and year out. And then you even look in his most recent history when he had dusty quarterback Sean Payton. Drew Brees was age 39 to 41, was still averaging 19.8 fantasy points per game. Russell Wilson, he had 18 points per game. Trevor Siemian was 18 points per game. Even Teddy Bridgewater was right around 17 points per game. So even if you just gave him 18 points per game, that's right around quarterback 15 there in terms of yearly production for Bo Nix, landing in a perfect spot, in my opinion, for his skill set. We know Sean Payton loves that kind of point guard style distributor, and that's what Bo Nix, one of the most accurate quarterbacks, maybe the most accurate quarterback of this class, threw 45 touchdowns and under 4 interceptions, under 7 sacks, really takes care of the rock and just gets it out and lets his guys do their thing. I think it's a great mesh of quarterback talent and what Sean Payton wants to do in his scheme. They clearly love the guy, and they go up there and pick him at 12, and a lot of people thought he might be more of a round 2 pick. So between the draft capital, the skill set and scheme meshing, the weapons might leave a little bit to be desired, but we'll talk about Troy Franklin a little bit later. Fell all the way to round 4, his main college weapon. I love seeing when a college quarterback links up with his main weapon too. I still think Marvin Mims has a lot of untapped potential. And I've already talked about how I really do like Cortland Sutton more than the most sane humans typically do. So I don't think the weapons cabinet is all that bad either. I like this spot for Bo Nix, and there really weren't going to be too many spots I liked him, but a lot of people mocked this one up, and it ended up working out. So I consider him a winner and someone that I might take a stab at in the last type of rounds of my best ball draft, given the history of Sean Payton and his quarterbacks.
Yeah, and we all see what we're getting here. I mean, this just absolutely screams Sean Payton walking into the Broncos war room and just laying it all out on the table, saying, we're taking Bo Nix whether you like it or not. And he went and got his guy. There's no denying the collegiate production of Bo Nix. I mean, both at Auburn and more so at Oregon, he was one of the best just in terms of raw production numbers. He was up there with the better quarterbacks in the nation. So, yeah, you have to be excited about it. I mean, obviously, this is a reach. Most people had a mid-round grade on Bo Nix. So, but Sean Payton going out and getting his guy, and he's going to have a chance to compete and be a starting quarterback, and that competition is Zach Wilson. So, I mean, if he's in a legitimate competition with Zach Wilson come August, I think that raises a lot of red flags, but
he won't be. Now, I'm not worried. There's no way.
Yeah. We'll see the training camp reports. I mean, obviously, like, there's going to be like the coach speak stuff. Like, yeah, this is anyone's job. Someone's going to have to go out there and earn it. But I'm expecting Bo Nix to be the starting quarterback for the Broncos. I'm not particularly threatened. I don't think anyone is threatened by Zach Wilson. So he's got the opportunity to go out and get a starting NFL job from day one as a rookie. So there's nothing not to like about that. He's in line to get reps as a rookie. So, I mean, that's all I really have to say on the matter. I mean, I'm not thrilled with Bo Nix as a prospect or the weapons around him, but when it's a starting quarterback in the NFL, sometimes that you got to be happy about that.
And speaking of starting quarterbacks, I'll maybe let you take this one because I don't want my Patriots bias to take over. They land Drake May. I'm pumped about it as a Pats fan. We needed a new, fresh, exciting start, and they get a dynamic guy with a cannon arm. I was hoping for Jaden Daniels to fall, but ultimately I've accepted that it's Drake May, and I like what they did around him between Jalen Polk in early round 2. Love the Javon Baker. We're going to talk about those guys once we hit receivers next. I really like the additions around him. They did bring in some offensive line help as well. It was just refreshing to see the overall draft philosophy, even if I didn't love the picks at the line position they made. Just they really went and attacked their needs. They didn't focus on defense when they already have such a strong defense as they typically have done in the past. So I like what they did in this draft. It's hard to consider it anything more than a C landing spot, in my opinion, just because we don't know what these weapons are. We don't know how the line will ultimately mesh, but they did at least give him some support, so I can't give it an F grade or anything of that nature either. So this is my kind of preface to Drake May. Should I be excited as a Pats fan, and are you excited at all? I know in our earlier drafts, we had been drafting Drake May a bit in hopes of a Vikings or something of that nature. Now these with the Pats, are you a little bit grossed out, or what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar range as you. The talent of Drake May is balanced out by the landing spot. Like, I've always liked Drake May as a prospect. I mean, I believe Josh Downs had over 1,000 receiving yards with him just 2 years ago at North Carolina. And then last year, that offense was on life support. And he had a connection with Devontae Walker, who is a late round guy that a lot of people have liked throughout the pre-draft process. But yeah, like you said, it's really nice to see that they are understanding that they need to, when they bring in a rookie quarterback with this high of draft capital, that they need to put weapons around him to make things work early on. Because in today's NFL, where we see team, especially like the fans calling for it, but like even in teams that are actually doing it, they're moving on from their top 10 pick within like the first 3 years of them being on the roster. So you need to make things work pretty quickly with your rookie quarterback, especially when you're spending a top 3 quarterback. So them going out and getting 2 guys in the mid rounds of the drafts, I think that's just, like you said, a really positive thing from a team outlook and strategy perspective, for seeing the Patriots operate like that. And I like both these guys. I mean, Jalen Polk, I enjoyed what I saw from him in Washington last year. I think Javon Baker is one of those guys that the fantasy community has been excited about, but I don't think too many people are familiar with his game out of UCF, just not having that many eyes on him. But drafted in the early 4th round, I think he was the 5th pick of the 4th round, but that's kind of beside the point. Early 4th round draft capital, and with the players that are currently in the New England wide receiver room, I think he's got a chance to come in and earn targets immediately. Like, I've been praying for the day where I don't have to consider Pop Douglas as a legitimate receiver in an NFL receiving room. And I think we're finally here for that day, that we're not going to see these just complete dustball guys running out there for receiver or at receiver for New England. So I think a new page, a new chapter has been turned in the book of the New England Patriots. We were in that awkward post Tom Brady era, and now we're obviously well into the Drake May era, and I've always liked him as a prospect. And you can't say that they've given him the best tools to succeed, but they are certainly trying. And I think the balance between May as a prospect and what he's been given in New England, I think the neutral C grade is just right about where everyone's going to have him. And I don't think there's any reason to be too bullish or too bearish one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And at minimum, Javon Baker does not lack for confidence. I don't know if you saw his post-draft presser, but talking when they asked what are the expectations of what can New England fans expect of you, and he said, I can make people stand out of their wheelchairs or something. I don't get the exact quote, but something absurd of that nature. And I love it. I mean, the guy is pumped. He's ready to be here. They've already talked about Polk and Baker getting together, working out with Drake May throughout the offseason to get that early chemistry. And sometimes that's all you need. And all those guys do flash some talent. As Krana does say here, and great comment, anybody got questions, get them on in here. He likes JJ more than Drake May. And honestly, in fantasy, I would agree. I have JJ actually ranked now higher than Drake May. That has flipped since the pre-draft, given, as we talked about, that A-plus landing spot for McCarthy. But Drake May's not too far behind for me, clocking in at quarterback 25, just a couple spots below there in the same tier as JJ McCarthy, because I think he has those better tools there in terms of everything. And now we got our last quarterback that we just have to quickly bring up. I don't want to spend a lot of time because I'm getting itchy to draft here. And Michael Penix, I don't think there's much to say. He's likely, if anything's working out for the Falcons, not seeing the field at all this year. So I had to give this an F in terms of a landing spot. I was very intrigued. A lot of people talk about how Penix had the best arm talent in this class, and I doubt we're going to get to see it flashed at all this year. Next year, who knows? Maybe in the 3 years, we'll see Michael Penix. But in terms of 2024 redraft value, you can't touch the guy at all in drafts, right?
I mean, yeah, it's just all around brutal. I mean, we don't have to get too far into this, but yeah, he's not going to be relevant unless like there's a significant setback for Kirk Cousins or like just
Achilles.
it's a complete mess to open the season or something. I don't even think if it's like bad, they're going to move away from Cousins. But yeah, this is a total mess. They said they were like trying to follow the Green Bay method or whatever you want to call it. And it's not the Green Bay method. You're spending a top 10, like Jordan Love drafted in the 20s as I don't know how old he was when he was drafted. He was 21 years old probably. But now you're drafting a guy who's in his mid-20s with the 8th overall pick who's had 2 massive knee surgeries. Like, it's not the Green Bay method. You're not taking a raw prospect and trying to develop him for a couple of years. You're taking a guy who's halfway to his AARP card with multiple ACL reconstructions, and you're using the 8th overall pick on him. Like, I don't know what they're thinking here. Everyone who's an NFL fan has heard the spiel that I'm giving right now before. So we don't need to get into too far into it, but it's a disaster and not on the fantasy radar this year.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to move on to our next position and probably the meat of the show, the wide receivers. But as we're doing so, Wolfpack, please do consider, if you like what you're hearing, that thumbs up button on YouTube, Facebook, a heart on Twitter, the shares, the retweets. It all greatly helps us grow. We're so pumped to be breaking these rookies down with you. And if you enjoy what you're hearing, please do consider helping us out there. Well, moving on to the wide receiver position, Marvin Harrison landing with the Cardinals. There's 4 A+ grades I gave. I just wanted to highlight him real quick because I think he belongs as a fringe first rounder now in fantasy redrafts, given this beautiful spot. I wrote it up at rotostreetjournal.com. Kyler Murray's top target in 2022, I know you put this note on here, 10 of 15 games, 10+ targets. And to add even more context to that, so Hopkins averaged over 10 targets per game when he was healthy in 2020 and 2022, was the wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 9 in fantasy points per game across those 2 years. He was hurt in 2021. But when also D-Hop was out in 2022, Marquise Brown averaged 10.7 targets per game, wide receiver 5 in volume, and 18.3 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 7 in that sense. And these guys, I don't think can even hold a candle. And I love Hopkins, but at this stage of his career, a fresh young Marvin Harrison, maybe the best wide receiver prospect that's come in the last 5 years, decade, who knows? We know that this guy can do everything at every single layer of the field. And we know that Kyler Murray loves to pepper his number 1 guys and really has no one else to throw to. So to me, do I take him over Garrett Wilson? Do I take him? It's just a matter of how high do I rank him, but he's certainly right there as a fringe first rounder for me, and definitely by round 2. It's what we kind of expected. It's what happened. I think it's gold. Do you have anything else to add to that? Because it's just such a beautiful spot.
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of strolling his way into 150 targets or so. Yeah, we've talked about it at length over the course of these drafts. Kyler Murray just feeding targets to whoever that guy has been, either Hollywood or DeAndre. And I fully believe in the talent of Marvin Harrison. I watched him for 3 years at Ohio State pretty closely. I would like to say pretty closely as an Ohio State fan. But, I have no questions in the talent. The draft capital's there. The opportunity will be there. I mean, unless something significant like injury-wise or something like that happens, this is a cakewalk to I think cakewalk to a top 20 receiver season.
Absolutely. And again, this is a redraft focus show. I just want to keep reiterating that. But dynasty-wise, I think really only CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the only 3 I could comfortably rank ahead of Marvin Harrison. We'll do some more dynasty breakdowns. But in terms of just in 2024 value, I had 3 other guys with A+ landing spots that I think are walking right into amazing situations. That would be Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, and Ladd McConkey. Now, saw your notes on the show that you might not actually agree with Xavier Worthy as an A+. So maybe we start there, and you can just kind of give me your take on Xavier Worthy, and then I'll rebut why I think it's absolutely a perfect spot for him for sure. But let's hear what you don't love about it for fantasy.
Yeah, so I love, like, we talked about it right before the draft, our pre-draft show. Like, this is like the spot that makes the most sense in terms of the profile for Worthy and a team that understands how to use a player like him. But obviously this is the dream, but I'm just like, first I'm already just like seeing the price in my head. Like, the Chiefs big receiver, the new guy in town. Like, we've been burned year after year since Tyreek Hill by this new flashy guy. So, like, that's always going to be in the back of my head. And it's probably not fair to, like, keep that in the back of my head just because it's a completely different guy and different draft capital. They burned a first-round pick on him. They're going to want to get him involved. I mean, but We've seen Sky Moore, they used a second-round pick on him. We've seen Kadarius Toney, another first-round pick, who obviously wasn't drafted by the Chiefs, but was brought in later on. They've been wasted away, and I don't know. You can put it on the player themselves, but so that's just like one concern that I keep in the back of my head for that. But the target competition is just going to be really brutal. It's the only way I see Xavier Worthy getting there is just on the back of insane efficiency. And I know he can do it, but some of those like targets that we're going to be seeing from Worthy, like those screen targets, like how is Rashee Rice going to play a role in that? And you put a little bit of a note in here. You said, I believe it's 50% of his catches came on screens. Like that was Rashee Rice's bread and butter last year. And it's going to come down to a lot of it is going to come down to the suspension. So there's a lot of variables that play here. And I'm having a hard time just really getting there for Worthy. Like you've got Travis Kelce, who was just brought in on another 2-year extension. He's going to be eating up targets. You've got Hollywood Brown, who I don't love, and I think Xavier Worthy will be a bigger asset to this offense than Hollywood Brown. I don't love him either. And then you got Rashee Rice, who's going to be a significant target earner too. I mean, like I talked about his role in the screen game, but I think they expand his route tree and get him involved throughout the offensive scheme. So the target competition is just going to be really tough. He's going to have to do it on very few touches. It's going to require insane efficiency, and unless he's like converting on a lot of these deep balls, I just don't really see him getting there.
I think I agree with a lot of your points, but I also think he's going to end up converting on a lot of the deep balls, and especially the screen game. As you mentioned, nobody has a better wide receiver screen game than Andy Reid. We've seen it time and time again when Tyreek Hill was here, where they just designed it so that Tyreek Hill had just a little bit of space and then could just outrun the entire defense. Who's better than that than Xavier Worthy, 4.21 speed? We saw him do it a ton throughout college. Now, deep threat-wise, he actually, as Scott Barrett pointed out, was the worst in this entire class in terms of yards per target on deep passes. 9.2 yards on deep throws per target was the worst of this class. But he also had the worst accuracy on deep passes as well, 33% catchable target rate. That's going to change with Patrick Mahomes. So I think he has untapped deep ceiling that we have not really even fully seen quite yet. And then, as you mentioned, one of my nuggets on there, 46% of his catches coming on screens. That's what his bread and butter has been. And we know Andy Reid is going to use that to absolute perfection. I can just see the vision in my head of all the plays where he's going to just outrun the entire defense on just a quick little screen. And sure, Rashee Rice, he'll get his screens as well. He's very efficient in that game as well, but he does not have that kind of breakaway gear that Xavier Worthy has. So I expect him to actually potentially out-target Rashee Rice, or at least be more efficient on those looks. And who knows, again, how long we'll see a suspension here for Rashee Rice. Either way, I'm all about this. I think the fit is great. I think we have an untapped deep ball ceiling. And I just see Mahomes. We'll talk about veteran risers and losers in another show sometime soon. But this is like the year I see him getting right back to that 5,000-yard, 40 touchdown. He's got all the weapons around him, and I think the pie is just going to be massive, and that Rashee Rice can eat, that Xavier Worthy can eat, and Kelce can eat as well, and maybe even some Marquise Brown. I still like all these guys, and yeah, maybe it will be tough to really sustain 4 guys, but we've seen it from Mahomes in the past, at least 3 guys being completely fed. I think it can happen here this year. It's just, and the fact that they traded up to 28, the fact the Bills even let him do that is asinine to me, but they clearly wanted this guy to give up some extra capital to the Bills there. I think it's going to be a perfect fit. And as soon as he gets onto that field, it's going to be dynamite. We did speak of the Bills as well, which I consider an A-plus spot for Keon Coleman. Now, regardless of what you think of the player, and I don't know that I love the guy, 4.61 40 does make me nervous, although timed at 22 miles per hour while running his routes at the combine was the fastest time of anybody. So the game speed, the time speed don't seem to match up. I do think he has a little bit more juice than that timed 40 would suggest here. It's more so, though, the opportunity. We talked about this on the pre-draft show, but just to reiterate yet again, 3,353 air yards, the most in the league, 73.3% of their air yard share, the most in the league, 317 targets, including 54.7% target share, both second most in the league, and 86.3% of their wide receiver target share up for grabs there in Buffalo. And you look at what Diggs has done since being there. And again, you can't just be like, Keon Coleman's going to be Diggs. digs, that would be idiotic. I know that's not going to be the case. I know he's not going to be quite the volume hog, but 168 targets, wide receiver 3, 163 targets, wide receiver 7, 152 targets, wide receiver 4, and 161 targets, wide receiver 9. If anybody on this roster is built to inherit a similar role, it is Coleman, who does have that big body build that is great in contested catches, that does do some damage after the catch when he gets it, and is actually commanding targets in his college career. He was just a little bit below Rome Odunze in that tier, but right below them in terms of his ability to earn targets in college. I loved his. I don't know if you watch any of his post game or post draft presser, but just seems like a great, hilarious dude. I know that doesn't mean anything for fantasy, but he just seems so fired up to be there, and as he should be when you're only competing with Curtis Samuel, who I do like. He's going to have his own niche role. I'm not discounting him, but I do think that Keon Coleman has all the upside in the world to dominate the looks here. Said he's already envisioning 3 touchdowns in 30 seconds since he looked at the field. And I really could see that he is really, really good in those contested catches. So I think at minimum, even if he's not seeing a target share like Stephon Diggs, he does have that 8 to 12 touchdown upside with a guy like Josh Allen throwing him the rock. I'm a huge fan of this landing spot. I hope it works out for the guy. Even if I don't love the player, I think it's perfect. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's tough because, there's still an ongoing debate. Like, is this guy actually good? Like, people can't seem to agree. But regardless of whether or not you think he is, it's undeniable that this landing spot is great. And I don't need to go on to keep talking about like the vacated volume and opportunity and stuff. But I think the only other point that I really want to make is I think his skill set and profile mesh well with Josh Allen. And we know Josh Allen is this gunslinger type that loves to get the ball downfield. And we saw some of that with Gabe Davis, but they really couldn't find that connection on this past season. And we've got little competition for Keon Coleman to come into that X receiver role. They've only got Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir there, neither of which have the athletic profile or the size to be a true X receiver. So he's going to kind of just roll right into that X receiver role, and his big body, physical nature, physical style of play, I think meshes really well with Josh Allen's. Like, I don't want to say he's like unaware of potential mistakes, but he's not adverse to risk. He is more than okay with getting the ball downfield, putting it into some questionable spots, and I think the profile for Keon Coleman will mesh well with how Josh Allen wants to play football. So I'm pretty excited about this landing spot, and just like the lack of competition, it just makes it that much more enjoyable. But another guy that I think is strolling into volume is Ladd McConkey, and I agree. I think this is an A+ landing spot. McConkey is a really versatile guy. We saw him not only play but succeed at both out of the slot and as a wide receiver in his career at Georgia. So I think he's going to be able to get opportunities early in the season just based on his skill, let alone just the lack of competition that we have in LA right now. And I know that there's a lot of questions like, what is this offensive scheme going to look like? Like, how much opportunity will Ladd McConkey actually be provided? But I think he's regarded to be one of the more polished route runners in the draft, just like an all-around NFL ready receiver. Like, obviously he's not like this massive, like physically super, like he's not going to physically dominate a football game, but I think he's got this skill set and the versatility to be involved with the Chargers offense from day one. And I think you'll have those opportunities pretty quickly. And we've seen, and obviously it's a completely different coaching staff, but we've seen players in Los Angeles have success on the back of really high volume. I mean, Keenan Allen, he's not like, obviously he's a physical specimen, but he's not like one of those freak athletes that's changing the game of football because he's of his physical traits. He still is an all-around, just really high quality receiver. And I think Ladd McConkey has a path to be highly involved in this offense just because of his complete skill set. And I think it's going to be coming from day one.
Absolutely. Keenan Allen, as you mentioned, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 12, 12, and 3 with an average of 18 fantasy points per game across his 4 years with Justin Herbert. He was a whopping top 24 receiver 62% of the time, which is insanely consistent for the wide receiver position, averaging 10.3 targets per game and 27% target share. Absolutely. I think they're comparable skill sets here. And Ladd, not just a slot guy, played 69% of his snaps out wide in college, can get it done at every layer on all the types of routes. I could totally see him being that kind of slide in, and not maybe Keenan Allen right away, but I don't know. It'll be too far off. You do rightfully mentioned the concerns with the scheme. Greg Roman, such a run-heavy offense, has never been higher than 28th in total pass attempts besides one of his 11 years calling plays. That does seem like a concern, and it is, sure. But you look at when he was in San Fran across those 3 years, Michael Crabtree, 127 targets, 85 catches, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. Anquan Bolden at age 33, 129 targets, 85 catches, 1,179 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then you also got Bolden the next year, 130 targets, 83 catches, 1,100 yards, and 5 touchdowns. All those years were at least a mid-range wide receiver too, if not better, in those 3 fantasy finishes. So I don't think it's just a complete, oh, it's Roman, no one's going to ever throw it, no one's ever going to catch a ball. No. And this is Justin Herbert at the quarterback. That was with Alex Smith, the ultimate game manager, and then Colin Kaepernick for those tail end years. Now you get an arm like Justin Herbert. It's as if Jim Harbaugh will never adjust to the type of talent he has. There was talks that they were getting lots of calls to move Justin Herbert, and they did not even come close to entertaining them because of how much they love him. So you got to imagine that at minimum, we're going to get a receiver seeing 120 or so targets from one of the best arms in the game. And I am with you that I think Ladd McConkey is that bet. All these guys, Xavier Worthy, Ladd, Keen Coleman, top 40 wide receivers in my rankings here. So fringe wide receiver 3s, but I think all 3 of them have upside to bust into that top 24 wide receivers if things bend right for them in the volume department, and it looks like it might. Now, those were the big ones to highlight between Marv, Xavier, and of course, Keen Coleman and Ladd as A+. There are a handful of other guys I do consider winners here. We don't need to go too deep into all of them. I'd consider it more of like a B to B- landing spots, but they certainly got bumped up after the draft in my rankings compared to some other receivers we're about to talk about, that neutral to losing landing spots. And those receivers, in my opinion, were Rome Wilson, going pick number 84 in round 3 to the Steelers there. Malachi Corley also going in round 3, pick 65, the first or second pick there of round 3 going to the Jets. And then Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, we already illuminated the fact that there's so much opportunity up for grabs here to be Drake May's number 1 guys. So all of those 4 guys to me were considered big winners. You also got to add in the fact that Polk went round 2, pick 37, so some nice draft capital there. And I thought Baker, one of the steals of the draft in round 4 at pick 110. So those were guys I also considered winners. I have a few takes on all of them, but I'd love to hear if you agree with these, if there's any that you have questions on, or anybody you think I'm forgetting as a potential winner here.
I'm Malachi Corley doesn't really move the needle for me. Maybe I will hear your spiel on Corley after this, but I think Roman Wilson is a notable winner. I mean, we've talked about guys strolling into opportunity in these offenses, but you want to talk about strolling in opportunity? Roman Wilson is going to walk into this slot role for Pittsburgh. Do you know who led Pittsburgh in slot routes last year?
Was it not Deontay?
No, it was Allen Robinson ran the most slot routes, like significantly, by a significant margin, ran the most slot routes for Pittsburgh last year. So if that tells you what kind of I don't know what else is going to tell you what kind of availability there is in terms of the slot role in Pittsburgh. And I mean, just like some external thing just about like Wilson as a prospect. I mean, this is just like the type of guy that Mike Tomlin's going to love, just like certified winner, great guy out of Michigan. And he's kind of like the antithesis of Deontay Johnson in terms of doing all of the other things. Like there's videos of him just mauling dudes into the ground, blocking for Blake Corum over the years at Michigan. So this is a guy that I can see getting on the field really quickly for a Mike Tomlin offense. And the role is just, it's right there for him. It's on a pedestal. I mean, beating out, is Allen Robinson even on the Steelers roster anymore?
Probably not. If he is, I don't think he'll sniff the field.
I mean, like, I know Calvin Austin is still on the roster, and he ran it wasn't a ton, but it wasn't nothing. But I mean, if all he has to beat out is Calvin Austin, and then like obviously like Freiermuth is going to get some run out of the slot, but there's nobody. And just as a player, I think the coaching staff's going to love him, and just the lack of competition. Yeah, this is a significant winner for me.
I absolutely agree. And I point to Mike Tomlin's words himself, who is usually pretty reserved in his praise for rookies, especially. He comes out and says he's a good player. He's competitive. And this in particular, I thought was of note. He creates separation at break points. He's battle tested on the interior portions of the field. I mean, you think about Deontay Johnson for years, but then also even before that, Antonio Brown. Those are the type of receivers that have absolutely dominated workloads and been used to perfection in this Mike Tomlin offense for sure. Those guys that can really dominate, separate quickly, and work that, again, the battle-tested interior portion of the field. Nothing screams more like a Mike Tomlin guy, in addition to what you mentioned in terms of, he also highlighted that you can't say enough about the winning component in terms of how it shapes his relationships with the game and what they're willing to do, their mettle, and he checks a lot of those boxes. So he couldn't have – I've never seen Mike Tomlin, honestly, be this effusive in his praise for a rookie. He is in love with Roman Wilson. I agree to the fullest. This is in terms of player skill set, in terms of player mentality, the exact guy that he's going to want to go and win with. I'm a huge fan. I know you questioned the Malachi Corley judgment here, and really it's just, to me, Aaron Rodgers coming back. I'm trying to project a potential like Randall Cobb style role back in the day where moved into the backfield, moved in the slot, lots of those designed yak opportunities. And maybe that's not what happens here, but they already talked about how, like, I think the quote was he'd run over his own grandmother to get into the end zone was what the head coach there, Robert Salah, said about Malachi Corley, how much they love the dog nature of him and how they're going to use him, especially in those goal line packages there. A lot of Randall Cobb, who had multiple 12 to 15 touchdown seasons with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. I see a very similar type of skill set and role mesh there for Malachi Corley, plus that nice draft capital being the first receiver taken in round 3 there. That's more so where I'm coming from there. Do you think there's any validity to that, or are you just like, no thanks?
It's just hard for me to come up with like a path for there to be 3 like legitimate fantasy threats in this offense. Like I've always just I've been operating under the thought that this is going to be a pretty, I don't want to say slow, but like they're not going to be relied upon heavily. I think they're going to be playing a lot of low scoring games with that great Jets defense. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be asked to be like doing a ton. So, and you've obviously got your guy in Garrett Wilson. The second option, well, you can debate who's the 1 versus the 2 between Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, but you've got your obvious 2 offensive playmakers. And I think that Malachi Corley is going to bring a lot to the Jets as a player. Like, I just think this is one of those situations where Malachi Corley might help the team a lot. I just don't think he helps your fantasy roster too heavily. Like, you require a special kind of offensive environment for three guys to be supported and make significant impacts. And I don't think anyone's really expecting Corley to make a significant impact. Maybe I'm like holding him to a little bit too high of what I'm expecting him to do, but I just like don't see 3 major fantasy impacts out of the Jets offense. And we already know we've got 2 in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson.
I totally see that argument. I guess the only counter I'll offer, and then I'll quickly touch upon Baker and Polk for the Pats and why I'm so pumped for them to be here. When you look at any game without Zach Wilson since Robert Salah has been there, I mean, we're talking Mike White and Joe Flacco, garbage quarterbacks. They actually average the most pass attempts per game with those 2 guys under center. I know LaFleur's not there anymore, and so it's a different coordinator, so I don't love Nathaniel Hackett. I get it that maybe he's not going to craft an offense that can sustain 3 guys, but we have seen them willing to chuck the rock, and that was with pretty much the same defense. It wasn't like they were in shootouts. They just love to chuck it. Pass rate over expectation there. So there might be a situation when they finally get the quarterback they gave up so much to get and they kind of base their future on. Maybe they just want to prove the world wrong, let the thing go, and they sling it all over the yard. I could see it. I could definitely see it. So don't get too discounted on Malachi Corley. I think it's going to be a really interesting role there in a Randall Cobb style situation. But just with the Pats too, Jalen Polk again picked 37 round 2 and Baker picked 110 round 4. I thought this stat was really illuminating. You know, Drake May has that cannon arm. That's what everybody's highlighting about him. Well, Jalen Polk on his deep targets, a 99.9 PFF grade, one of the highest graded wide receivers of this class. 14 of 28, caught 50% of his targets there for 567 yards and 5 touchdowns. And now, well, how did Javon Baker do? on deep targets, 99.9 PFF grade as well, caught 15 of 30, so another 50% catch rate, 574 yards and 4 touchdowns. And another stat on Baker I saw, I love this guy. I'm so pumped for him. 80% of his catches went for a first down or a touchdown, which is just an insane rate. So 2 big play guys, deep ball mavens, loading up with a cannon-armed quarterback in Drake May. So I thought these guys, there's really, and who are they competing with? As you mentioned, Pop Douglas, the number 1 receiver last year. Come on. I like Kendrick Bourne when he's healthy, but he's coming off an ACL tear. I don't see anything really, as long as these guys are as good as I think they could be. I think they're going to both be immediate day 1 starters, both in line for about 20% or so target share from a up-and-coming, again, maybe Josh Allen quarterback from what the comps may say. So I think this is actually a sneaky, really good landing spot, and especially when you factor in draft capital for Polk.
Yeah, I just want to take a second to appreciate that Javon Baker stat that you pulled out. 80% of his catches going for a first down or a touchdown. That's ridiculous. I mean, I remember 2 years ago watching Marvin Harrison against Penn State. He had 11 catches, and either 10 or all 11 went for first downs or touchdowns. And I was like, holy shit, like that's an impressive performance. He did that for his entire collegiate career almost.
I know.
So that's kind of ridiculous. But not getting too bogged down on these Patriots guys, we can move on to the guys we gave a little bit more of a neutral grade. Starting with Malik Neighbors, I mean, it's just so tough. Like, everyone loves him as a prospect, but now he's got, in his own words, he's got Daniel Jones as his quarterback. I don't know if you saw that interview from Neighbors, but he's got Daniel Jones throwing the ball to him. It's tough. Like, it's not the perfect comparison, but I want to liken this to like Garrett Wilson going to the Zach Wilson Jets. Like, he's got the talent to be fantasy relevant, but I'm not going to be prioritizing this guy in drafts. He's going to slip down to the middle rounds, if I had to guess, like 6th round or so, and for redraft leagues at least. And it's just, he's got the talent to make the most out of a crappy situation, but there's only so much you can do as a wide receiver. I mean, you can get open every single time, but if the ball's not getting delivered to you on time and accurately, like, there's only so much you can do. So we saw Garrett Wilson be good as a rookie in a terrible situation, and I think we can have similar expectations for Neighbors. Like, he's got the talent, the run after the catch skills to make explosive plays happen just so completely on his own with that yak stuff. But I don't think we can have. I don't think we can shoe him in as a top 24 receiver, and I don't think he'll be drafted like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for me because I agree completely that the quarterback talent is going to be a huge detriment here. Daniel Jones, absolutely garbage. Yet there is so much volume also up for grab because who's he competing with? Nobody here. Jalen Hyatt had his flashes last year. Sure, Darius Slayton can take the lid off the defense at times, but he should be Malik Neighbors walking right into 130 to 150 targets. This is the exact example. I want to continue to reiterate too. Yeah, we gave it a C grade. He's still by far my 2nd highest rated, both redraft and dynasty rookie wide receiver. Of course, Marvin ahead of him, but I do have Neighbors sliding in at wide receiver 21 right now, which is a couple spots above the ECR. I know that it's a concern here, but I do think there's a little bit of floor baked in because if Daniel Jones does blow as much as he did last year, 2 years ago, he wasn't too shabby, but if he just never returns to that form and is garbage, well, he did sign Drew Lock, and I'm not saying Drew Lock is this insane world beater backup quarterback, but he can sling that rock. He got a few moments in games last year, and he really looked efficient. He impressed me, and for all honesty, I wouldn't even be stunned if he ends up beating out Daniel Jones. I know the money is in his pocket for Daniel Jones, but I don't know. Drew Lock at least bakes in a little bit more floor because we saw when Tyrod Taylor even became the starter last year. I mean, Darius Slayton started to average 16 points per game down the stretch last season. That's Darius Slayton. So I believe in Brian Daboll. It's also why I don't think this is a complete failure of a landing spot. I think he can craft coming over again from those Buffalo offenses. He does love to throw it. He can use his receivers in unique ways. I think they're going to move Malik Neighbors all over the place, design a ton of looks to get him the rock, and I think he could just be quarterback proof given how talented he is. I don't know. Maybe nobody's Daniel Jones proof. We'll find out soon enough. But even if Jones is that bad that Malik Neighbors can't get it done, then I imagine they're going to be calling Drew Lock's number, and I think even Drew Lock's good enough to then get him the rock. We shall see. Some other neutral guys we listed, some talents I like A.D. Mitchell. I was stunned to see him fall all the way to 52. in round 2. Going to the Colts, we kind of labeled that a neutral situation. We'll talk about in a second. Xavier Legette also going round 1. I like the capital, but to the Panthers at pick 32, it's tough to believe in anything tied to Bryce Young at the moment, even though he didn't get a fair shake last year. Still, it's not a situation I'm excited about at the minimal right now. Troy Franklin, stunned to see him fall to round 4, pick 102 to the Broncos. I'd love to call him a winner, and I've got some reasons why I could, but that draft capital is also pretty damning. Brian Thomas falling to the Jags at pick 23, an interesting spot, but ultimately there's a lot of mouths to feed. They signed Gabe Davis. Calvin Ridley himself was quite inconsistent in that kind of deep outside threat role. I don't know that we can expect more from Brian Thomas. And then Jermaine Burton, who, again, this is a redraft focus show. I love Jermaine Burton. In Dynasty, given that T. Higgins is likely gone next year, to be the number 2 for Joe Burrow is going to be awesome. But to be behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, yes, we've seen Tyler Boyd have some wide receiver 3 moments, but it's going to be tricky to expect Jermaine Burton to do anything substantial in redraft, or at least consistently at that. But I do love the player, and I could see him being a monster as soon as 2025. So those are a few guys we had neutral grades on. Is there anybody you want to dive into deeper? And I got a couple points I'd like to make after we go to your guys first.
Yeah, from a best ball perspective, I can see myself ending up with a lot of Brian Thomas. Just like he's one of those raw athlete, like super high ceiling guys, but we're not entirely sure what we're getting just because of he played behind Malik Neighbors last year. He didn't operate as an alpha receiver in LSU's offense. So, but like everyone loves the talent, just like the attributes, the combination of size and speed. And given the prices of the other Jacksonville options, especially like Trevor Lawrence, I think his ADP is in the 120s right now. So I'm looking forward to grabbing a fair amount. Like I can just see myself backdooring a lot of these stacks. Like that offense was pegged to be like the breakout offense of 2023. And we didn't really get there. Like they had their moments, but we're seeing pretty significant reduction in prices for all these guys like Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, and then we'll see where Brian Thomas settles out. But I like him as a talent. We talked about him a little bit in our pre-draft show. I've always been interested in him, and I think this is a solid landing spot. Obviously, there's some competition with the respects to Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, who's coming off a 100-catch season, and Zay Jones isn't nothing in my opinion. So there's some competition, but with the prices, I can just see a lot of backdoor stacks with this Jacksonville offense. And then I'll give my 2 cents on Jermaine Burton as our resident Bengals guy. But I mean, not a lot of people are expecting a big role for him in 2024, and I don't think it's going to be significant. But I mean, the Bengals ran 3 receiver sets at a top 5 rate in the league last year, and who are they trotting out there? I mean, like I for one, just like I like Andre Yoshi. You kind of got to be pretty wrapped up into the NFL or fantasy football to know that name, but he's kind of a flyer name out there. But who's gonna be the third guy? And I know it's tough. Like you've got Chase, Higgins, and Burton. Burton and Higgins, like they're not gonna be like a slot type of guy. Like Chase got some run out of the slot, but Higgins and Burton both profile to be like that vertical threat. And Burton's averaged his average yards per reception. I know it's like not a great stat or anything, but it's just like it kind of tells you what kind of player it is. It was 20 yards per reception last year. Like he's getting downfield. So we'll see what happens with them throughout the offseason, but it's hard to see him not out there just given who's on the roster right now and the frequency at which they run 3 receiver sets. So I think he'll get some chances, but I agree. Like this is a more setting yourself up for 2025 when T. Higgins has departed. But do you have any specific thoughts on any of these other guys?
Yeah, just to return to Brian Thomas, I think it's a really interesting point that in best ball, I'm certainly willing to keep going in. Now, we were taking him quite a bit at that like round 6 or so spot there, right around Calvin Ridley, in fact. And at this point, I would certainly bump him down quite a bit. He fell about 20 spots or so in my rankings. But in best ball, I do see the case there because 35% of Ridley's game last year went for 20 or more points. And that's exactly what you want in best ball, those big, huge spikes. 31-point day on the record, 25, 22.6. We had those huge spikes. There's more so when Ridley didn't hit 5.2, 1.5, 4, 6.3. He was killing you in redraft when he wasn't hitting, but ultimately he had those huge spikes to help you out in best ball where we don't worry when he's not hitting. So I could see this being one of those definite situations of veteran best ball for Brian Thomas and giving you maybe 5 to 6 of those huge spike weeks. That's really what you want in that kind of 70 to 80 range where I imagine he's going to start falling to. So I think that's a good point there. I just might avoid him in redraft myself. I did want to just mention Troy Franklin, given that I thought he was going to go round 2. I really like the player, and I love that he's now ended up with his college quarterback. I'm a little bit worried about that round 4 draft capital, given how predictive draft capital can be to future success. But the Broncos did come out and say, Sean Payton, that they had a round 2 grade on him, that they had no idea why he fell that far, that they made sure to trade up and go get him. By the time he was still there in round 4, they had to go up and get him and link up their college quarterback with his main weapon from there. And we've seen how well Sean Payton can use the deep threats, but also Troy Franklin is not just the deep threat. He could get it done once he has the ball in his hands. He kind of becomes that running back, even though he's smaller. He's not a big, painful bruising guy, but he's very shifty, very crafty with the ball in his hands. So I think he could be used very intriguingly by Sean Payton with linked up with his college quarterback. It's tough not to talk about A.D. Mitchell just real quick, too, given that a lot of people expected him, myself included, to be a first-round pick. Now, we highlighted this, a lot of the analytics guys thought, the worst yards per route run ever for a projected first-round pick. And just if he's so talented in the film, when he pops. Why is he not doing it more often? I thought all of that was very fair, and we saw him fall as a result here. So without the draft capital, it does have to make you get a bit concerned. Also, the fact that this is probably going to be a bottom 10 team in total pass attempts, assuming that Anthony Richardson stays healthy, they're definitely going to lean on him and his legs, as well as Jonathan Taylor. So I just don't know that I see a pie here big enough for A.D. Mitchell to also be sustained when you got target hog Michael Pittman. I probably do see Josh Downs out of the slot, some more higher percentage looks, probably getting a little bit more volume than him too. So we're looking at the third guy on the target totem pole, as intriguing as his skill set is. And I love that Shane Steichen, he's got a rare ability to separate at the top of his routes. He's got an arsenal of releases versus press, man. You see it show up on tape to get him where we got him. I couldn't be more fired up. You love that comment. It's awesome. And he certainly will probably have a spike or two, probably 4 or 5 of them in there. So maybe in best ball, he could still be a guy that you go after. But to me, the volume just won't be there for any type of steady consistency, and that lower draft capital really is a ding, because that was what a lot of people were propping him up on. So a little bit nervous to see him go there, and I do not consider it a win because of it.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I mean, I think your point about just like the draft capital versus the production sums it up pretty well. Like, people assumed he was going to be a first-round pick, and that would justify his lack of efficiency in college. And now that he slid into the it's not even like early second round. It was firmly like the mid-second round. So it's definitely concerning. But I think like if there's some light at the end of the tunnel, we're going to have a high, fast-paced offense in Indianapolis. And we know what kind of arm strength we're dealing with Anthony Richardson. So I think, like you said, we can expect to get a couple of spike weeks out of A.D. Mitchell just with Anthony Richardson under center. And I just think there's going to be a quality offense in general. So with a receiver with a talent like A.D. Mitchell and just a high-quality offense generally, I mean, it's kind of a given that he's going to have some performance throughout the season. And so I'm not too adverse to drafting A.D. Mitchell, but I am not as interested as I was pre-draft in our big board drafts. So we'll see where his price shakes out, and he is going to be one of those guys who's taking probably a significant slide down draft boards. But we'll see where he settles out, and we can reevaluate there. But yeah, I was disappointed with the landing spot for A.D. Mitchell, but I've not completely given up hope yet.
Yeah, and now we're moving to wide receiver losers, and I don't want to say we've given up hope on these guys, and we were laughing pre-show, like, yeah, this guy's a loser in our eyes. Roma Dunze, this freak athlete that's making $8 million a year, loser. Yeah, come on. We know he's not a loser of a player. We know this guy's an absolute animal. We were drafting him at like pick 40 or so in our earlier best ball drafts, because in any other class, he would have been the wide receiver one. The guy's a beast. He's still my third highest guy in in best ball rankings right now for these rookies, but it's hard to consider him anything but a loser in the terms of absolute landing spot for just redraft. Again, redraft purposes only, given that he's now competing with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, two proven target hogs. Not that Udunze is not going to command some targets himself there, but a rookie quarterback on average has only averaged about 219 yards, even when they're selected in the top 3 picks. I know Caleb Williams is probably going to do a whole lot more than that with these weapons, given that he's known as the best prospect since Andrew Luck by a lot of evaluators. So I'm expecting him to average right around 250 or so. But is that enough to really sustain all 3 of these guys, plus a guy in Cole Kmet, plus DeAndre Swift coming out of the backfield? This is just a lot of mouths to feed. And so you put this note on here that I think is a good comparison. As good as JSN was, the number 1 receiver prospect of last year's class, when you're competing with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who I also don't think are as much of target hogs as DJ Moore and Keenan Allen here, it just, is there enough volume to sustain it? So it's hard to me consider Rome Odunze, as much as I love the player, and long-term, it's hard to really discount. You always want to bet on talent in Dynasty. I have the pick 107 in our league, and I'm probably going to go Rome in hopes of him becoming the number 2 to number 1 guy within the next 2 to 3 years. But for next year, for redraft specifically, I don't know that I can really fall in love with this landing spot. And he fell a solid 30 to 40 picks, where I had him at like top 39 or so before this landing spot overall. Now he's more so in the 70s, in my opinion. Do you consider me crazy, or what are your thoughts there?
No. I mean, we all I put that little note in there. It's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but we all watched JSN. I mean, everyone loved him as a prospect, or most people loved him as a prospect. And then he just fell flat on his face. It was just too hard to compete with those guys. But in the case of Rome, from a redraft perspective, it's tough, and I'm not going to be drafting him aggressively. But if you're doing one of your dynasty rookie drafts in these next couple of weeks, I think it's fine. I mean, Keenan Allen, it seems to be, it's just like a 1-year rental, and just like hopefully set up Caleb Williams for success down the road. Just like start him off with some quality receivers, and then allow Rome to develop and become that wide receiver 2, the true wide receiver 2 in his second year with Chicago. So it's not like a bad landing spot in the long term, but I agree, like for this year, for 2024, it's really tough. And I don't see him just getting there on volume. It's like I said it about Worthy. It's going to just take some ridiculous efficiency. And I mean, we'll get the weeks. We'll get the weeks out of Rome in best ball. He'll have some good ones, but I'm just not seeing it in a season long.
No, me neither. Although I will just say, I believe in the player almost enough to say that, like, if he beat out DJ Moore and Keenan Allen to be the number 1 guy this year, it wouldn't stun me. Now, those are 2 very highly established guys, and I don't expect that. But if we kind of rewound this and we're, playing fantasy receipts game here of looking at our takes that look bad, like, wouldn't stun me if Rome just kind of shoved pie in our face. Like, nope, I am that good to be the number 1 weapon for the number 1 quarterback prospect from day 1. I could see that as well, but for right now, it's hard to project it as anything but the number 3 right now. Ricky Pearsall also in a very similar situation. Impressive draft capital going all the way to pick 31, round 1 guy that a lot of people thought might be more of a round 2 prospect. And I always enjoy when an offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan drafts somebody and raves about how he can do it all from the outside, from the inside, at every layer. You love to see all that, but similar to Rome, he's playing behind Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Had they traded one of those guys, then bam, off to the races. Ricky Pearsall would be in love for 2024. But until one of those guys is gone, and everybody knows that in 2025, one of Deebo or Ayuk, there's no way they can afford them both. So at next year, I'm going to be in love with Ricky. I think he is a beast. You saw the way like CJ Stroud reacted. Oh man, I wanted this guy on my team. He's always open. A lot of draft pundits coming out and saying he could catch 100 balls is the rumblings. I think it was Schrager who said, Shanahan expects this guy to walk in and just catch like 90 balls right off the jump. I just don't see the path to that type of volume when you're competing with those 2 guys, plus Christian McCaffrey, plus George Kittle. Yes, down the road, I think this is a smash landing spot. So this is why we want to emphasize this is redraft, not dynasty. But from day 1, I don't see the path to Ricky Pearsall getting any type of consistent playing time or volume unless there's an injury, in which case, yeah, he would definitely seem to step up here. But a guy I know you liked a lot entering our early best ball drafts. What do you think about the spot? Because it is an intriguing offense, of course, but just so many mouths.
Yeah, a guy I've loved as a player throughout this pre-draft process. Yeah, I'm gonna be pretty much out on Ricky Pearsall unless something happens with either Ayuk or Debo. I mean, throughout Shanahan's tenure in San Francisco and specifically in 2023, bottom of the barrel in 3 wide receiver sets, and I mean, Pearsall's not gonna jump Debo or Ayuk into those 2 receiver sets. That would be insane to say. So if and when the opportunity is there for him to earn a regular role in San Francisco, I'm gonna love it, just like you said. But right now on April 29th, he does not have that opportunity. So it's a really hard time to make the case for him. And if you're not on the field, you can't catch passes. And right now he is unless like there's a significant offense. Like I don't think Ricky Pearsall is like the type of player that makes Kyle Shanahan significantly change his offensive scheme to include 3 more wide receiver sets. So I mean, like you could maybe make that argument for a higher caliber prospect, but that is not Ricky Pearsall. I don't think we're going to be seeing a significant change in how the 49ers offense operates next year or in 2024. So this is more of a long-term investment for Dynasty or maybe a keeper league. But yeah, in redraft, unless something happens before week 1, yeah, he's not off the radar, but he's not someone to be hyper targeting by any means.
Yeah, it's 2 other guys listed in the losers columns that are very made of a similar mold here, almost like a wide receiver handcuff. Jalen McMillan in round 3 going pick 92 to the Bucks. Decent capital for the guy, a player I actually really, really liked. I had him pre-draft right next alongside Jalen Polk. So I'm a big fan of the player, but a big body slot guy, that's what Chris Godwin does. And I just don't see a path to playing time as long as Godwin and Evans are both on this team. And similarly, Malik Washington, one of my favorite prospects, one of my favorite evaluators, Danny Kelly, loved this guy. I fell all the way to round 6. I couldn't believe it. Goes pick 184. And similar to the personal argument, when a guy like Mike McDaniel's a bright offensive mind, a great scouter of talent, he was pumping his fist. He was stoked to get Malik Washington. I love that a genuine like play caller gets a guy like that he's fired up about. It makes me fired up too. But then you just think, okay, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they've really never had a third wide receiver do anything on this team. So to me, it is more of a handcuff situation at wide receivers. The guy did have 110 catches last year, led the country, nearly 50% of his team's receiving yards. He can get it done. He's great in and out of his breaks. I thought he'd be an awesome slot weapon, maybe the best slot receiver in this draft. Why did he fall so far? I don't know if he's that good, but I really did like the player. So maybe McDaniels does craft around him a little bit more and get 3 receiver sets. I still have a tough time seeing him carve out any type of value without an injury. But one of those guys, similar to Ricky, if there was something to happen to a guy in front of him, would be going right into a great system with quality quarterback play, with a guy that would know how to use him. So it's hard to call him a complete loser, but he probably needs an injury to come into value, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, it's just so highly concentrated between Waddle and Hill that nobody last year even had more than the 3rd highest number of targets in Miami last year was Durham Smythe with 42. So no one really doing anything significant outside of the 2 big dogs in Miami. So more likely than not, it's going to take an injury, like you said. So someone that I think we should be interested in the talent in, and someone who has a skill set that Mike McDaniel has continually proven to be able to use to the best of their abilities. So it's exciting in terms of like a landing spot and his skill set meshing with the offensive scheme. But unless something happens to one of those guys, I just don't see him having the opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, and one receiver that we didn't talk about that I saw a couple of questions come in about is Devontae Walker. How do we feel about his landing spot with the Ravens? I don't hate it. I'd probably put him closer to the neutral to loser category, just given the volume in Baltimore isn't going to be great, but great deep threat with a quarterback that has absolutely slung it before with Lamar Jackson. Todd Monken loves to get these guys streaking downfield, and there's a path to, other than Zay Flowers, yeah, Rashad Bateman got his extension. He's done nothing at all throughout his career, so I don't love that player. I could see a path to Devontae Watkins at least carving out that deep threat role. So I'd probably grade him as like a C- or so landing spot with a smaller pie, but probably the right skill set to thrive with Lamar, with that play caller. Do you have any quick thoughts on Devontae before we move to our last two positions here?
I agree that it's an ideal landing spot for a guy was drafted so late. The question that I've just been asking myself throughout this pre-draft process is just whether or not he was carried by Drake May. I mean, it was pretty obvious that offense was on life support outside of just like Drake May doing it all and making things happen, especially this last season. So that's just like the only question I'm asking myself, like, is this guy actually good, or was he just carried by a future top 3 pick? So I lean towards like he's like actually worthy of being an NFL caliber receiver and landing in a receiver room that hasn't really had like a consistent guy. I mean, you can say what you want about Zay Flowers. I'm not the biggest fan in terms of him being a true alpha in a wide receiver room, but beyond Zay Flowers, I mean, yeah, you said it. Rashad Bateman's still there. They seem to like him enough to give him an extension, but the competition is minimal. So there's certainly a path for him to have relevance, but I am not just given the draft capital and everything else. I'm just not super interested, but someone I'm definitely keeping my eyes on, and he'll be drafted like in best ball drafts. So someone to definitely consider, but he doesn't like pop off the page by any means.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to our next position in just a second. We'll pack over 250 of you with us. Love to see it. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please do consider that thumbs up button, helping us continue to grow, to continue to get out to more people. We so appreciate you being here and watching the show. And of course, get your questions and comments in as we do our draft. We will be answering those. Krana, some great discussion topics as you always bring up. We cannot wait to hit all those questions and keep them coming on in. We'll make sure to hit those. We're now moving into the running back position, and this will be a bit shorter than the receivers because, unfortunately, there was not very many winners. Me and you had been texting throughout the weekend, just, damn, this guy goes here. Another one bites the dust. Nobody going to the Cowboys, and then ultimately the Chargers not investing in the position till round 6. So very hard to call anyone a huge winner. Besides Jonathan Brooks, who we both agreed was in a tier of his own as a running back talent, I actually, the more I've thought about it, started to really like this landing spot. And I know there's some warts here, but you look at him landing with the Panthers and what Dave Canales, their new head coach, did with the Bucks. He fed Rachaad White 336 touches, second most in the league behind only CMC. And when he's right and healthy, Jonathan Brooks, I think, is 10 times the player. I'm not a huge Rachaad White guy. And so if he's willing to feed that guy 330 touches, I imagine once Brooks is good and ready to go, he's also going to be fed. He talked about Dave Canales when he was introduced before drafting Jonathan Brooks, how much he wants to stay committed, stay stubborn was his word choice with the run game. And then he goes and adds 2 premium mauling run blocking guards in free agency, the first 2 big signings they make. They've also added a bit of talent around now Bryce Young. And again, I am a little bit cautious here, given how bad that was the most painful offense to watch in the entire league last year. Absolutely horrendous. There's no way around it. The Panthers were the worst show in town. But again, Adam Thielen's your wide receiver 1. Your line sucks. I don't know that I could give up on Bryce Young quite yet, even though it didn't pass the eyeball test at all, didn't elevate anybody really around him. I still think they've made all the moves you kind of have to make to at least give this guy in this offense a shot. And Jonathan Brooks, it all comes down to how is that knee? I know he tore it towards the end of last year, but once he's healthy, and all the reports are that he's going to be by training camp. No, it wasn't the Cowboys. It's what we all wanted. Didn't happen, but at least there's a path to a play caller that loves to use his guys on an offense that should take a big step forward this year. So Jonathan Brooks, to me, was one of the bigger winners at the running back position. My running back 26 now in best ball rankings, jumped up a couple spots. That would have been, again, running back probably 15 had he gone to the Cowboys, but ultimately not the worst landing spot in my opinion. Am I crazy, though, or are the Panthers just that bad that we can't even sniff him?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, it wasn't Dave Canales, so it's a little bit comparing apples and oranges. But I mean, we saw once Miles Sanders overtook, once Chuba Hubbard overtook Miles Sanders last year, we saw him getting 20 touches a game, and obviously a different coaching staff, so we had different expectations. But like you mentioned, I mean, they fed Canales was a part of an offense that fed Rachaad White last year, so you never really know. I just think it really comes down to the health. Like, it's not a question of is Jonathan Brooks going to overtake Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders, whoever's the pseudo RB1. It's a question of when. And if he can do that in the first quarter of the season, I think he's going to be a top 20 running back. But if it's halted off for a little bit, if it takes a little bit longer than we expect, whether just because the team's not comfortable or if he just physically isn't ready, like to take on a full workload, it could be a number of things. But if that doesn't happen until like a little bit later in the season, maybe even into the second half, I don't think it'll take until the second half of the season for him to really come out of his shell and be the true running back one for the Panthers. But yeah, it's just really the health, and the training camp reports are really going to drive his ADP.
Yeah.
So if they're negative, it's going to cause a lot of people to come off of them, and I'll probably jump back in because I think no matter what really happens, unless he has another injury, the 2024 season ends with Jonathan Brooks as the top running back in Carolina. So I mean, I will see where his ADP shakes out for BBM, but it's looking like he's going to be one of the cheaper guys who's like a shoo-in to be the starting running back on their team. I don't, shoo-in might be too aggressive, but I just don't see a reality where they spend a second round pick and a guy with the talent like Brooks doesn't overtake Chuba Hubbard. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think it's more of a formality, and this is Brooks' job to have whenever he's healthy and capable of handling an NFL-sized workload.
I mean, not only a second round pick, they traded up to get him too.
Yeah.
That was some hefty capital they gave up. So clearly they had a vision in mind. I agree completely with you. Once he's ready to go, I think 15 to 20 touches at minimum will be the expectation. So I'm looking forward to that. It ends up being a winning spot. Now, in terms of other guys, nobody got quite a boost like Jonathan Brooks in landing spot. There are a handful of guys that I thought landed in decent locations, albeit with some lower draft capital. So maybe we're just going to be spinning our wheels talking about guys that don't really matter. And one of the biggest takeaways actually of this draft to me, we'll talk about on another show, but in terms of veteran running backs, maybe while we're drafting, we'll mention some of these guys. So guys like Zamir White, Zach Moss, Gus Edwards, guys we've actually been drafting a decent amount, so I was happy to see it, are ultimately going to be in line for probably 250 or so touches, which is madness because their teams did not invest or invested very little in the running back position. But all that being said, we're focused on rookies. We're focused on redraft here. I think Ray Davis is probably the second biggest winner of the running back position, landing in a great offense with the Bills. And yes, James Cook will be the main back. I do think James Cook is in a great spot to see a ton of receiving volume, given that Keenan Coleman's the only offensive player they added as a pass-catching focus there in this draft. I like James Cook a lot, but I also could see Ray Davis playing that souped-up Latavius Murray role. I believe you looked it up. He had some pretty astounding goal line usage, if I'm not mistaken, right? Latavius Murray did?
Yeah, he was top 12 in the league as in terms of carries from inside the 5. So he had the goal line role pretty much on lock. And even when they flipped from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady, I know that was a time where we saw a change up in the usage for James Cook, and a lot of people point to that to being a positive in terms of James Cook outlook for 2024. But even when that offensive coordinator change came, Lat Murray still somehow hung on to that goal line role and was the primary guy that they were going to inside the 5. So if Ray Davis can come in, and I think it's pretty feasible for that to happen and take on that goal line role, his competition will be Josh Allen. Unfortunately, he's not just competing with James Cook for that role. But I mean, there's a lot of questions about this offense, but I still think it'll be quality. I think Josh Allen is a strong enough quarterback to carry along the weekend receiving core that's now highlighted by Keon Coleman. But if Ray Davis is able to come in here and take on a little bit more of the in-between the 20s work than Lat Murray, because Lat Murray last year was basically exclusively like third and short and then picking up the goal line work. So if he's able to take on that Lat Murray plus role where he's getting work in between the 20s, I don't think we're going to see him use much as a pass catcher, but kind of that ground and pound throughout the length of the field and then get used at the goal line. I think he can be fantasy relevant. I don't think he's going to be like a game changer, like guy you need to have drafted in the last couple of rounds of drafts. I think James Cook is going to pretty handily control the touches in Buffalo, but he's definitely a guy that I was interested pre-draft. And the landing spot, I mean, I think my level of interest remains the same. It's not great, but it's definitely like a positive. And then with these other guys, I think The only one that I'm super interested in is Tyrone Tracy. I mean, at this point, we're talking about guys. Tracy, 5th-round draft capital. Vidal and Lauby, however you want to pronounce it, 6th-round draft capital. So you're kind of like picking at straws with these guys. I mean, running backs who are drafted in this range, they rarely work out. I mean, like, people are going to point to Kyron Williams, but I think that's more, I think most people recognize that's more of an anomaly than an expectation. So Tracy, like the wide receiver, converted wide receiver, he provides some interesting traits that I think the Giants could use. And I'm not completely sold, or I don't think anyone is sold on Devin Singletary being like a high quality NFL running back. He does what the coaches need. We've talked about him just being an innings eater type of guy. Like, he does everything well enough that he stays on the field and he's not a liability out there. So he can be on the field pretty regularly. But I think Tyrone Tracy can compete. I don't think it's that hard to steal work away from Devin Singletary. And then with Lauby in Las Vegas, I was really hoping that the Raiders were going to take someone, because I'm not the biggest Zamir White guy. I said throughout the draft process, like, if anyone lands in Las Vegas, they can be competing with White for touches. But unfortunately, like, the skill set for Lauby, just like, it doesn't project to be highly used in an Antonio Pierce scheme. Like, we see, he fell in love with Josh Jacobs. Like, he talked about he was their key to winning when he was healthy. And then they go to another, like, mammoth of a man in Zamir White later in the season when Jacobs wasn't healthy. And I'm sure you've seen those off-season workout videos from Zamir White. Yeah, Lauby is just like, he's not remotely even similar. Like, they're not even close to the same running backs, Laub versus White and Jacobs. So I don't think he's the type of running back that Antonio Pierce is looking for. So I'm not like super excited about it. I think he can siphon off some of the pass catching work, because that is not exactly White's wheelhouse. So I think that's where he can make his mark. But the 6th-round draft capital and just like what I think that Antonio Pierce values in running backs, it's tough to see a world where Zamir White isn't handling the vast majority of touches.
I'll put in just a couple counters for you. We'll start with Dylan Lauby. The one, actually, one of my our original fans wrote to me right after the draft, Mr. Gonzo. I don't know if you're watching, but shout out to you. He connected a couple dots, and you've seen the comparison, Dylan Lauby and Danny Woodhead, and it's like, okay, a White pass-catching running back, right? But Tom Telesco was the Chargers GM when they went and made a point to go out and get Danny Woodhead from the Patriots, who had 90 catch seasons over there, and now he goes and drafts Dylan Lauby, who, whether it's just because he's a small pass catching White running back or not, he is one of the best pass catching backs in this class. Some people calling him the best route runner there. He was the Senior Bowl stud. And yeah, sure, coming from UNH, didn't face the best of competition. I did actually get to see him face Holy Cross when I went out to a game, though, and he popped off the page, and he was running all over the field, catching the ball. I think he had 9 catches against us. The kid can absolutely play. And sure, I think Zamir White will dominate the carry total, but I could see Lauby walking into 40 to 50 catches, given that comparison to Danny Woodhead, given the GM going out and getting a guy that he once had that type of role. Wouldn't stun me at all if we saw Lauby ultimately catch 40 to 50 balls. And if something happened to Zamir White, or if Zamir White's just not getting it done, don't rule the kid out. I think he's a baller. That his small school stature drove him down a little bit, but man, he could, if he gets the opportunity, and I think he will, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up being a player, and there's a path to it with the Raiders, one of the most open opportunities. And open opportunities are also abound there for Tyrone Tracy and the Giants. You highlighted a lot of it, but just the numbers here, 375 total opportunities vacated, most of those because of Saquon Barkley leaving, but that was 87.6% of the backfield total opportunities last year. So Tyrone Tracy, a very versatile player, once a receiver, as you highlighted. I could see him getting a very intriguing role. I'd still believe in Daboll, as we talked about with Neighbors. I could see Tracy carving out a nice receiving role there as well. So I like both of those guys. But I did want to also highlight Kimani Vidal going to the Chargers, who we labeled the second best spot behind only the Cowboys for running backs. Of course, the Cowboys did not take anybody. They did re-sign Zeke, and we'll talk about him because I see your question, Chrono, on that. But ultimately Vidal landing with the Chargers. We know Greg Roman, top 3 in rush attempts in every single year calling plays except one, 9 out of 10 years. Loves the run game, and it's a creative run scheme. He mixes the power concepts, lots of pulls, but then gets some zone in there. It's just a great if he gets a diverse runner, it is awesome. And right now they only have Gus Edwards, who's 29 and has never, I think he has 700 career carries at age 29. He's barely seen a workhorse load ever in his career. And then you got J.K. Dobbins, who we've never seen stay healthy, coming off an Achilles injury that typically ruins rushers. I could see Kamani Vidal got those Maurice Jones-Drew style comparisons. And I know, I don't even know if you know who Maurice Jones-Drew was back in the day, because we were talking about Cadillac Williams, but it's harkening back to one of my earlier fantasy seasons when MJD was a waiver wire pickup and ultimately had 20 touchdowns, that short, squat body that can also catch the ball. Vidal was visiting the Chargers time and time again. There was lots of rumblings that they were in love with this kid pre-draft, and they make sure to go out and get him. Yes, round 6 draft capital. Don't love it, and I don't expect that to ultimately yield a humongous role. But also an injury-prone and maybe not fully healthy J.K. Dobbins, and then just Gus Edwards, who I think Gus Edwards is in a great spot to yield some humongous value where he's getting drafted right now. But even still, we can't sit here and act like he is this world beater. I could see Kamani Vidal carving out a pretty significant role. And if there is an injury to either of those guys ahead of him, especially if it's Gus Edwards, wouldn't be shocked at all. A 3-down skill set coming out of Troy there was my kind of favorite sleeper running back of this class, and he goes and lands in one of the juiciest opportunities you could possibly ask for. So he's a guy that has flown up. Like I said, he was my favorite rookie sleeper running back, but now, he's contending with some of these bigger names that yielded much worse landing spots, in my opinion. He's going to become one of those guys that I draft at the end. Kyron Williams was my guy last year. I think Kamani Vidal is going to be that last round running back that I snag in nearly every best ball draft. I'm a humongous fan of the player and the landing spot.
It's pretty obvious the level of opportunity in LA. I mean, they didn't add a notable name, and it's just Dobbins, who has not been able to maintain a healthy season throughout his career, and Edwards, who he's just a guy. Like he's no difference maker. He can do what's asked of him, but he's never really asked to do that much. You don't really build your offense around him. So I agree, the opportunity is there, and I think I've learned my lesson taking on listening to you about these late round stabs, especially the rookies. So I may have to take Kamani Vidal a little more seriously, because the path is pretty clear. I mean, we know that they're going to want to run the ball a ton. That's what we're getting out of Harbaugh, and the talent is certainly lacking. And there's certainly a possibility where I don't think there's a reality where he turns into like a Kyron Williams, who's like a 6th round pick and ends up being a bell cow. I don't think that's going to be the case, but meaningful work is certainly within the range of outcomes, some handful of carries a game, some games cracking double-digit carries, if someone goes down or something. The path is there. So yeah, I think it may be time for me to consider Kamani Vidal a little bit more closely. But on to some of the guys that we think have a little bit more neutral landing spots. And one guy that was some people considered to be the top running back, top prospect in this class, Trey Benson, lands in the early 3rd round with the Cardinals. And it's not a great landing spot just because he is guaranteed to be behind James Conner. So it's going to be tough for him to come by work. And we've talked about how we like James Conner, just as one of those underrated guys who consistently produces and can do everything. There's no glaring flaw to his game. He's no game breaker, game changer guy, but he does everything well. He can catch the ball. So it's kind of a tough landing spot for Trey Benson in that sense, that he's got a guy behind or in front of him who doesn't have a super exploitable flaw. But it's not necessarily a flaw, but James Conner, we've talked about a little bit. He consistently misses time. The note you put in here, missed at least 4 games in 6 out of his 7 seasons in the league. So he's a shoo-in to miss a handful of games every single season. And you never really know if that. It's impossible to predict injuries, especially these minor injuries that only keep him out for a couple of games. It's tough to predict if and when those are going to happen. But if Trey Benson is given that opportunity. I mean, he's the type of player that could, at a minimum, if he's given the opportunity, like maintain a role even when Connor comes back. I don't want to say he would like completely overtake Connor as the top running back in Arizona, but I think if he's given the chance and he'll be able to maintain a consistent role and like produce a split backfield. And I think he could do that even without a Connor injury. Like I liked him as a prospect. I was going back and forth for a little while, ultimately settled on thinking that Brooks was the top talent out of this draft class, and Benson as the second running back. But so people regarded him to be a quality prospect. I mean, like, I know this is a bad running back class and he ended up with third round draft capital, but I still think there's a world where he carves out a role regardless of a Connor injury. So I don't think it's like a completely like dust. Like, we're not going to consider Trey Benson as a fantasy asset. But it's not great. Like, he's clearly going to be the second guy. And unless something significant happens to Connor, I don't think we're going to be seeing a high volume or a high workload for Trey Benson in his rookie season. Is that about where you're at with Benson?
Yeah, it is definitely a handcuff in my opinion, but as you mentioned, a handcuff that's likely to see some starting work. And depending on when that happens, I mean, we're talking about a guy in Trey Benson that is 220 pounds and ran a 4.39. I mean, that's like Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor. Very few guys have that type of size and can move that fast. So would it shock me at all? Should he start and then just be too good to give it back over? I don't know. I wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, he fell to round 3, so he's certainly not this type of generational prospect like those guys were drafted far earlier, but he's got the build. He's got that 3-down skill set, pretty solid pass catcher. I think a little untapped parts of his game there. And we know how involved they like to get their running backs there in Arizona. The passing game is why James Conner's been such a useful fantasy asset these last few years. So whether that's because he just flashes and is so good they can't keep him off the field and he just overtakes Conner, probably unlikely, but it's in the realm of possibility. But certainly if and when Connor does, unfortunately, have that injury imp come and nip him like it always does, I could see him taking that ball opportunity and just going to the point where they can't turn it back and give it to him. And certainly for the longer term outlook, again, this isn't a Dynasty show. We're focused just on 2024 today. We'll talk about Dynasty on another podcast, but ultimately I do love this spot long-term for Benson. I think it's on the last year here of James Conner deal. If not, only 2 more years there. And he could absolutely be that 3-down back of the future, learning from a true veteran like Conner, a workman, the right guy to raise him up. I'm a big fan of Benson long-term. It's more so not a huge diehard of this 2024 outlook. But a guy that's in a similar spot, in my opinion, is Jalen Wright going to the Dolphins. Another crowded kind of mess of a situation where you have Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane. But then you also look at how damn productive this backfield is, whoever it is getting the opportunity. So if we've seen Mostert and Achane both struggle with injuries, I know Achane's only 1 year in, but smaller build, and Mostert now at age 33, and he lasted all last year. But man, I'd be stunned if that continues this year. There could be a path where Jalen Wright becomes a lead back at some point for the Dolphins. And we saw 40-point days from Devon Achane last year. There's also the floor of Jalen Wright doesn't even sniff the field at all this year, given that he's got 2 pretty solid backs in front of him that have produced at really high levels. But if he does get on the field, I'm a huge fan of the game. Again, sub 4.4 speed at 215 pounds, a quality receiver. And Mike McDaniels, like I talked about with Kyle Shanahan, whenever he drafts, especially running backs, he was the 49ers run game coordinator. This is a guy that really knows his type, and we've seen his type flourish whenever they get the chance. So all it's going to take is either an injury or Wright to just flash in camp. And I like the player a lot, so I wouldn't be shocked at all if he does. And we had a quote from Mike McDaniel there where he said, I think all the players benefit when we have this many running backs with talent because there's supreme urgency to do right with the ball if you deserve to have it. So he's that kind of quote tells you that it's not like, nope, Devon Achane's our lead guy and Raheem Mostert's the second up and maybe Wright will get sprinkled in. It's like if Wright's going to be the best guy, he'll get the looks. That's, again, 2 big mountains to climb ahead of those guys. But whether it's injury or Wright just flashes, this is a backfield that can yield humongous value. And so just because it's crowded right now, I don't want to just cross off Jalen Wright. And that's why he's not a loser in my draft landing spot grades because of how good it could be if he gets that chance. It's just a bit murky for how he'll get there.
Yeah, I don't like – I feel like it's almost a guarantee that at some point in the season, either Achane or Mostert will get a little dinged up. And I don't think Wright will come into a starting role, but at a minimum get some touches. And I think this is just like a total mess of the backfield. Like in terms of like the player and the offensive fit, it's great. Like everyone would be excited for Jalen Wright heading to the Dolphins just in terms of his skill set and what Mike McDaniel can do. But this is like a total nightmare of a backfield. Like this is the type of thing that it makes me want to like procrastinate having a take on it. Like it's just like you can see it going like so many different ways, and the quotes from Mike McDaniel don't really help in terms of like trying to figure out what this depth chart and the opportunities are going to look like. So this is one of those ones that's just going to be highly debated throughout the offseason. And in my opinion, I think this hurts how I value Devon Achane the most out of all, simply because his price is just going to be so significantly higher. And I've like stood by this throughout the offseason. And I don't think anyone would like bark at it. I don't think that he is a workhorse back. Like he's not going to be taking on a ton of touches every single week. And we can debate this throughout the offseason, but I think the landing spot is solid, but it's just going to be a mess.
It could be messy indeed, but the upside is high. That's why you can't call it a complete loser of a spot. And then the last guy we had in like that neutral category, I didn't even put his name on the tag here, but Bucky Irving, obviously athletically, was so underwhelming at the combine. But then you put the tape on and you see the skill set. Great pass catcher. I said Dylan Labe had the upside to be the best pass catcher of this class, but I definitely think it will be Bucky Irving. He's got that really unique quickness, and he plays so much faster than the time 40 might suggest. And you look at his actual miles per hour when clocked on the season, he was the 4th highest back of this class. So I'm not overly worried about the bad testing. I get that Rachaad White, 336 touches, like we talked about already. He was an absolute monster from volume perspective, but they've talked all year about how they wanted to lessen that role. And at minimum, I could see Bucky Irving coming in and eating a ton of receiving work to lessen that load for Rachaad White, which makes me a bit concerned. We're going to talk about veteran winners and losers on another show as well, but I am a little concerned with Rachaad White seeing that type of workload. I think is a definite no in 2024, and I could see Bucky Irving really doing some damage as a receiver. Plus, if something does happen to White, he's got that 3-down skill set. So the kind of classic handcuff with benefits. I think there's a clear role from day one, and I could see him evolving into a featured back if anything does happen to Rachaad White. So I call this a nice neutral situation here for Bucky Irving.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about like how the situation looks for Bucky Irving. I'm going to be a lot more nervous about Rachaad White than I think other people are going to be. I mean, Rachaad White he did everything for the Bucs last year. He was out there for all 3 downs, and he was catching passes. He was taking all the carries. And I think this was simply a function of them just not having anyone better to do anything else. I don't think it's that Rachaad White is like an insanely good running back who deserves to have 330 touches in a season and like should be out there for every single snap. I just don't think that they had a better option and they were comfortable giving Rachaad White. And so when his volume gets reined back in a little bit, he's going to have to get there on efficiency or touchdowns. And that makes me pretty nervous. Like, he's not the type of talent that I want to be betting on when his volume gets pulled back in. So I don't, it's too early to say like how steep his price is going to fall. I anticipate it to come down some, but if it doesn't come down enough, I'm going to be pretty nervous about Rachaad White. And I can see myself being off of Rachaad White throughout the summer. But like I said, it's going to take a couple of weeks for this ADP to like fully like flesh itself out and see where everyone's really landing. So we'll revisit this like in a couple of shows perhaps and see where Rachaad White's being taken. But it's not I'm nervous about the pick that I'm not like super bullish on Bucky Irving. Like, I like him. I enjoy the 3-down skill set. That's something that I always value in running backs, but it's more that I'm becoming more and more nervous about Rachaad White.
Sure, indeed. Well, moving into the loser category, the reason we were forced in winners to wax poetic about Kamani Vidal and Dylan Labe and Tyron Tracy was unfortunately a lot of the bigger names landed in some tough spots. Blake Corum going to the Rams, where we've got Kyron Williams, an 80% touch guy, and I imagine that will flip now and change because Corum's there, but I still kind of view this as a pure handcuff. A sexy handcuff, a very valuable handcuff, no doubt about it. If Blake Corum becomes a starter at any point, it'd be tough to project him as anything less than a top 10 running back on whatever weeks he is the guy. But they love Kyren Williams so much. You talk about the post-game presser, or the post-draft presser rather, from Sean McVay, and he said, why did you draft him? Because he reminded me so much of Kyren Williams. So I don't think this is anywhere where Kyren Williams is going to hand over the keys or make a split backfield. I think it's more so a situation that they just wanted a clearer, safer backup to him. But we'll see. We'll definitely monitor that throughout camp, and maybe they do talk about making us a 1A, 1B. And if that is the case, Corum would definitely rise up these redraft ranks. And these guys that I'm going to go through, like Corum and Marshawn Lloyd, for example, I really do like these talents, whether it's handcuffed with benefits. So I ultimately, despite calling them losers of draft grades, there is still a path. There's still a reason to draft these guys. They're just not as clear of a path or quite as high of an upside immediate role when we're talking about these quote-unquote losers of the draft. Marshawn Lloyd, another one of those guys going with the Packers, but we know that LaFleur loves his ultimate committees. He's always been that type of guy, and he said about the Marshawn Lloyd that he gives us a different element out of the backfield, just a little bit of a different flavor, and I think that's absolutely true. Another guy, 4.39 speed, can really get it done as a receiver, was split out wide on 10% of the routes there. So I think there is absolutely a path to him carving out a little bit of a role, and then you got the Jacobs handcuff situation. So those were two of the names, Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd, that I had as top 5 pre-draft running backs that I don't know exactly where they'll shake out now for redraft purposes, but they're both intriguing enough talents in good offenses. Just the path to volume seems pretty cloudy for both those guys. Do you have any hard feelings on either of them before we highlight the last few names here?
With Corum, it's similar to the Tampa Bay situation. I'm just more interested to see how he's going to impact Kyren, and not even just like from the production. I'm more interested to see how he impacts Kyren's price. That is one guy I will be definitely keeping my eye on to see where he goes in our initial draft that is coming up. So
the long anticipated draft here. The 2-hour quick pregame.
Yeah, quick little 2-hour talk on the draft. But so I guess with that we'll start getting a little quicker here in our analysis. But yeah, Corum, I mean, the only I think he can like have a role, but the only like significant like portion of Kyren's like obviously like bell cow usage that he had last year that I'm a little bit nervous about is the goal line, just because Corum was just so elite at Michigan, punching it in from 3 yards and in. Like I don't know the exact stat, but I'm almost 100% certain he led college football in touchdowns from inside the 3-yard line. I mean, almost all of his touchdowns throughout his career came from that spot. So you know what you're getting with Corum, especially at the goal line. So that's like the only part of Kyren's like super valuable role that I'm nervous about him siphoning off. Like he's not going to catch passes. He's not going to get like a ton of work as a rusher, like maybe a handful of touches a game, like max out around 10, but he's not going to be like coming in and stealing a bunch of carries from Kyren on a week-to-week basis. So that's the only part that I'm nervous. But Marshawn Lloyd, I don't mind the landing spot like as much. I think you're a little bit more down on it than I am. I don't think it's great just because like you've got Josh Jacobs there who's proved that he is capable of being a bell cow back. But the strengths of Marshawn Lloyd complement pretty well with the strength of Josh Jacobs, so they can use them differently enough, and I think they can both independently carve out their own little roles. We talked about it a little bit in the pre-draft show. If Marshawn Lloyd can hold on to the ball, I did go back and look at it. He had a fumble for every 36 touches. So that is like something that I think if is a problem early on could like significantly hamper his ability to like stay on the field regularly. And I know that there's certain coaches that like value the fumbling more than others. Like they'll put him on timeout or like put him in the doghouse and whatnot. And so that's like kind of coach by coach. But if that was like every 36 touches was significant enough to me that I think it could be like a legitimate problem. And that's kind of like picking at straws in terms of like him as a prospect. So we'll see once he actually gets out there on the field. But in terms of some of these other guys, yeah, these are all just kind of brutal landing spots, like Shipley to the Eagles. I thought he was like a well-rounded prospect. Always like never expected him to have the draft capital. But yeah, behind Barkley and that mess of like Gainwell, Boston Scott, all those guys, like he's not really gonna. I don't think he differentiates himself from those guys. Like maybe as the Saquon handcuff, like he has some sort of value, but I'm still not super sure. And then Braylon Allen, they've got Breece Hall, and I don't know. I text you. I saw a guy with like 40% exposure to Izzy Abanikanda. So I guess that's gonna make like an interesting Breece handcuff like race during this offseason and during training camp. Who's gonna be the better handcuff to have for Breece Hall? But obviously with Breece there, he provides pretty little value. He's one of those guys who is a workhorse in Breece Hall. And then Estime to the Broncos is the last guy we have here. And I know that we were texting all weekend hoping he was gonna fall to the Cowboys, and Cowboys ended up just never addressing running back in the draft. So that will be a fun little thing to talk about Zeke and whoever else throughout this offseason. But pretty ugly landing spot for Estime. You've got Pirine is still in the mix. You've got Javonte Williams. And who is that other guy? I'm blanking on the name right now. He came on last
McLaughlin?
year. McLaughlin. And like, so it's just like a total mix of just like a lot of just average to below average like guys. It's just like a total disaster. And like, I think Estime can separate himself and maybe like earn some touches, but it's just all around these guys. We're talking about the bad landing spots for a reason. Shouldn't be shocking that I'm saying that this is all pretty tough. But any specific thoughts on some of these other guys?
No, I think you nailed it with pretty much all of that. With Estime, again, it's a guy that drafted about 40% of him in early best ball, hoping for that Cowboys spot. It was disappointing, but Peyton did come out and say, love him as an early down thumper, and especially around the goal line. So of all of those backs, I know Javonte Williams is quote-unquote the guy, but to me, he's going to lose receiving work to Pirine and McLaughlin, maybe touchdowns now to Estime. I could see Javonte Williams being an absolute zero at this point, just a between-the-20s grinder that who knows if he'll ever regain that form. I loved him his rookie year. They loved his running style, but that running style also led to a bunch of injuries. He just didn't look like himself quite ever last year. So maybe Estime ends up taking over all the early down work and the goal line. Maybe there's a path. Maybe I'm just talking myself into lunacy because I drafted so much of him early on. I will not be going after really any of those three, though, in the drafts we end up doing. And we're just a few minutes away from drafting there, folks. That runs up our running back position. We have just like 3 to 4 tight ends. It's really not a lot to dive into. It's not a class like last year. But as we get ready to draft, one last plea for those thumbs up. It really does help us out. The like button, the retweets, the shares, anything that you're willing to do. If you like what you're hearing, please do consider that for us. It would be so appreciated. Moving on to wrap the show up here with the tight end position. There's not a lot to dive into. Obviously, the Brock Bowers, where did he land? What are our thoughts about it is probably the most important news, but you already know he's not going to be labeled as a winner, given we only have one winner right now, and that's Ben Sinnott, landing as the second tight end off the board in round 2, pick 53 to the Washington football team. A lot of opportunity. Yes, they signed Zach Ertz, but I'm not sure Zach Ertz is anything but a zombie at this point, just a complete corpse out there. And we've seen Cliff Kingsbury use that tight end and use Zach Ertz over in Arizona at quite a high volume role there. And Ben Sinnott, a 9.76 RAS score, was one of the top 10 tight ends of all time, according to the relative athletic scale there. In fact, Sam Laporta, a 9.01 compared to that 9.76 for Ben Sinnott. I'm not saying that means Ben Sinnott's about to be Sam Laporta, but he did say that's who he likes to model his game after, at the Senior Bowl, while shining at the Senior Bowl as one of the highlight players down there. So I think this is a great spot in terms of draft capital, in terms of that air raid style offense that after Terry McLaurin, I do like Jahan Dotson, but there is certainly some volume up for grabs, and I don't think Zach Ertz is all that concerning to overtake at this stage of the career. So I love this spot for Ben Sinnott. He is up to a fringe top 20 tight end for me in here. He's really the only clear winner. I've got a couple others worth mentioning here, but what are your thoughts on Ben Sinnott landing with Washington, if you have any?
All my Zach Ertz bags are in shambles.
Yeah.
But I did actually have him here and there, just as like a late round stab when I had fully punted on tight ends. But that was actually a tweet from Pat Carrain over the weekend, poking fun about Zach Ertz. But yeah, I mean, I like him just like the just because of the athleticism, the athletic profile. Like, what's not to like about one of the most athletic tight ends that has ever been tested? So you have to like have some sort of like optimism from that regard, just like as a prospect and from his prospect profile. I'm not sure if I'm the biggest fan, just like for his in terms of his year one production, just because like it's kind of been changing over the last couple of years. I mean, we saw Laporta absolutely smash as a rookie, but historically, it's been tough for rookie tight ends to succeed. And yeah, I don't think that this is an offense that is going to prop up a rookie tight end. I think if anyone is going to be like the more fantasy relevant guys in Washington, I think it'll be Terry McLaurin, and I would bet on Jahan Dotson before I bet on Ben Sinnott. So I think he's like a winner in terms of like coming out with a positive landing spot. Like, it's setting him up for success down the line. But I am not like super interested in him for the 2024 season. I think that there will be better options within the Washington offense. But I think that, yeah. And moving on to Brock Bowers, just absolutely brutal landing spot. Everyone, not everyone, but a whole lot of people really expected him to go to the Jets at 10. Obviously, that doesn't happen. He ends up in Las Vegas, which is one of the more mind-boggling and bad landing spots, both at the same time. Mind-boggling in the sense that they spent, was it a second-round pick or a first-round pick on Michael Mayer last year?
Second-round pick on him. Yep.
Yeah, so another, like, obviously it's different than a first-round pick, but significant draft capital spent on tight end in 2 consecutive drafts, which is not something that people are accustomed to or would regard as a good way to build a quality football team, especially for the Raiders, who have struggled over the last couple of years. But yeah, it's going to be pretty brutal battling for targets with Devontae Adams, and Jacoby Myers is not nothing. I'm a Jacoby Myers fan. I mean, he relied a little bit in terms of his fantasy production. He relied pretty heavily on touchdowns last year, but I mean, he's still going to provide legitimate target competition to Brock Bowers. And I still want to bet on him just purely because of the talent. Like you've got there in parentheses, he's still a beast. He's still one of the best tight end prospects of all time, and it's probably the best or the second best of my lifetime that I can remember since like being heavily involved with the worldly NFL. So you still have to be excited about it in that sense. But given that he landed in Las Vegas, his value, at least his immediate value in his rookie season, is taking a pretty significant hit. Where are you moving him to in your tight end ranks?
Yeah, I actually have him right now. He fell from my tight end 8 to my tight end 11. So still a fringe top 12 guy. That just tells you how much I believe in the player, the talent. And Gardner Minshew, for all his faults, can get the ball. He likes to dink and dunk it. And I think that will yield some nice value here for Brock Bowers in terms of just passing volume. I think he'll be the clear number 2 to Devontae Adams. And I do like Jacoby Myers as well, but that's how highly I think of Brock Bowers. Just more so if he landed in the right spot, let's call it the top 5 picks with the Chargers or with the Jets as the clear number 2 for Aaron Rodgers, I would have had him right there in my top 5, 6 tight ends, even as a rookie. That's how good the player is. So yeah, it was a tough landing spot. I think more so it just absolutely nukes Michael Mayer. And that's too bad because I think he did some really nice things last year, was starting to come into his own. And I was really excited to see what he did in year 2. But ultimately, Brock Bowers is going to be that main man there. And maybe they do get some 2 tight end sets, the Gronk, Aaron Hernandez system that we've never seen recreated. Maybe those will be the 2 guys to pull it off. I doubt it, though. Yeah, it was just not ideal, given that there were some pretty wide open shares he could have landed in. And now he's going to be competing with a high-end capital, one of the best tight end prospects of last year, Michael Mayer. Not where we wanted to see him go by any means, but still a top 12 tight end because of how just damn talented he is. The only other tight ends I thought worth mentioning here were Jatavian Sanders, who was widely considered the number 2 prospect by most pre-draft pundits. Ultimately fell to he was the 4th tight end off the board, didn't go till round 4, pick 101. But he also does land with the Panthers, who had a wide open tight end target totem pole. Ian Thomas, the only other guy there. So I think Sanders can walk right in, be their lead tight end. But now you also do have a bunch of mouths that have opened up there in Leggett, Deontay Johnson. And then it's a matter of, can Bryce Young sustain even one viable fantasy weapon? You got Adam Thielen still lingering around there as well. Never mind potentially the fourth option on the target totem pole, but it's an intriguing big body that is one of the best pass catching prospects, at least at the tight end position for this class. But he also underwhelmed significantly at the combine. And there's a lot of data to show that at least as a rookie to break out, you almost always have to be a freak athlete. And Sanders just was not that in terms of his testing. So I don't love it, but there is a path to him having some value. I am quite intrigued by Theo Johnson going to the Giants right after Jatavian Sanders. He landed there at pick 107 in round 4. And the rumblings are Darren Waller will be retiring. We can't say that with certainty quite yet, but if he does, Theo Johnson could be walking right into the lead tight end role. Speaking of freak athletes, he was the ultimate freak athlete. The tight end 3 on Dane Brugler's big board as well. An even better RAS score than we saw from Ben Sinnott that I was already raving about. Theo Johnson was like a 9.89 RAS score. So ultimately, I think he's got some freakish abilities. And if Darren Waller's gone, we already know, Neighbors is going to hog a ton of volume, but there's just not a whole lot else on that team. I'd be stunned if he did a ton in year 1, but I just don't know that there's anybody else even to shout out here at the tight end position. So if Waller's gone, maybe Theo Johnson. I love Brugler, and if he thinks this highly of him, to think of him as a round 2 to 3 guy, and they got him in round 4, hey, it's something I'm at least worth noting in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, neither of these guys are really moving the needle for me. I liked Jatavian Sanders early in this these pre-draft drafts, but he lands in a less than ideal landing spot in Carolina. Just like it's crowded. It's not like super talented in terms of the pass catchers in Carolina, but it's crowded. So it's kind of tough for us to project any sort of reliable role for Sanders in year 1. But Theo Johnson, it'll come down if Waller retires. If Waller retires, I can see myself grabbing Theo Johnson a ton late in drafts where I just punt tight end, but he will not be someone on the radar until if and when Waller retires. But I think that's kind of like you said, the last 2 tight ends of note, not a huge tight end draft. So I think it's about that time that we get our first official BBM 5 draft fired up. And as we're loading in and you're pulling that up, talk a little bit about some of the changes to Best Ball Mania that we've seen this year. And we're already loaded into a draft. What is that? We have the 7th pick in the draft.
Number 8, dude. Pick number 8 for the first draft of the year, baby. I know I said, we usually go about 30 minutes before we draft. Ended up going nearly 2 hours, but I thought it was a great combo. So I'm happy to do it. It was a lot of rookie stuff we had to break down. And I think we went into good depth without going too crazy on it. And at 280, you're still here with us. You love to see it. So we are ready to fire up the first draft of the year again at pick number 8. So I cannot wait to see how this goes. And not the first draft of the year, but the first Best Ball Mania, of course. Yeah. And you were mentioning some of the changes. The payout structure, a lot more 6 figures up there at the top, no regular season payouts. So a lot more going to be riding the playoffs. We don't know that schedule quite yet, but I can't wait. Were there any other big differences you wanted to point out? And then we'll start hitting the mailbag while we draft here.
Yeah. So no regular season payouts. If you make the final, they pay you out like the equivalent of maxing 150 maxing the tournament. So 150 times 25, whatever that is, that's what you get paid out for making the final. So like that's just like the reward for making the final, is assuming you max out the tournament and you get all your money back for that. And I think it's 40 people who are making at least $50,000. So that's like kind of a ridiculous number. I don't know what the number was last year, but it was significantly less than that. So a good chunk of people are going to be making some pretty significant money. But with the changes to the regular season stuff, I think that just means that we're going to see like a regular season tournament that isn't focused on these like massive pods for the last like fantasy playoff portion, weeks 14 through 17. I think we're just going to see some tournaments that are based solely on point accumulation, and just whoever accumulates the most points over the 17 weeks, those will be the winners. But we're about to be on the clock here. So I don't really mind either of these options. I'm assuming one of them will go here, either Bijan or Jefferson will go here at 7. And for me, it's pretty easy. Just take the other one.
Yep, I'm in the same boat. Now, assuming and Bijan goes, so we'll go JJ. I'm surprised. Like I feel like with McCarthy there,
Yeah.
quality arm. We know that this guy it was highly thought of the team, and if Nick Mullins could sustain high end wide receiver one value for Jefferson, I think JJ absolutely can. I'm gonna love stacking JJ with JJ later in the draft. So getting Justin Jefferson at 8 is a awesome way to kick off our best ball mania season, in my opinion. I think this is a slam dunk.
And this is like kind of more macro, but I don't remember the Vikings making any significant additions to their defense either in the draft or free agency. So I think they're pretty primed to have another Swiss cheese defense and just throw the ball a ton once again. I mean, unless nothing's coming to mind, like specifically, is their defense going to be just terrible again?
Probably. They did. Remember, they traded back into like the back up in the first round to get that pass rusher, Hunter, I think his name
out
is.
Of Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a nice piece to add. But in terms of the secondary, it still should be pretty ugly. This is where the Kyron Williams conversation has to start. I'm still on board with going him right here. I could also go a 49ers guy. I'm not too concerned about Corum like we talked about, though. I think he's probably more of a handcuff. Are you against him at this point, though? Would you rather go one of the
I'm fine to grab Kyron here.
Yeah, I think falling this far, like we said, I do think Corum will he be involved? Sure, but I don't think it's going to be to the degree that Kyron can't pay off a mid-round 2 price. I'm all about getting him right there.
Yeah, and I don't mind going with the anchor running back here. I saw Justin Herzig from ETR posted his first like BBM draft board. In that draft, Kyron fell all the way to the back of the second round. So
wow,
So we'll see where he like kind of settles out, but it's looking like somewhere between like picks 16 to 20 or 16 to 22, if I had to guess where he settles out, like back half of the second round. So we'll see, but I'm okay taking him in the mid second round. I think the volume's going to be there regardless. I'm not, like you said, I'm just not super threatened by Blake Corum. I am very shocked to see Malik Neighbors go right there. That's kind of wild to me. What do you think about that pick?
I know. Now that we know where he's landed, again, like we talked about earlier, volume, yes. Volume from Daniel Jones, no thank you. So I especially when you have guys like Mike Evans, proven wide receivers with guys that can get him the rock that we've seen good rapports with. As much as I believe in Malik Neighbors as a talent, I'm pretty shocked to see him go that early as well. It's also interesting to see like what happens with these 49ers guys. Now that Ricky Percival is there getting all this hype, is he going to eat into their workload? Are they going to do more 3 wide receiver sets? Who, if any, get dinged? Or do you think it's just more of the same and we just kind of wait on Ricky to break out in a year or two? Are you worried at all about Dak Prescott getting stacked up in round 3? You got to love to see that in our draft if there's going to be some craziness already.
All right.
First quarterback off the board. Fire me up. Let's go.
So this guy in the 2 slot, he comes with Travis Kelce in the second round. So I was like, all right, we're already going to see the Travis Kelce bump 4 hours after he signs the extension. But I just believe this guy is just out to wreck worlds and just cause chaos. So Dak Prescott in the third round is not something we should expect to see throughout the summer.
No. We're about to make our pick, but thinking through and so now we got DJ Moore, Diggs. I do like Jacobs, but that'd be kind of early to go 2 running backs. I don't hate Pittman here. Any of these guys?
I think Diggs is my pick here, or Pittman, just because of the volume.
Yeah, I like Diggs as well. It gives us that potential to stack up CJ Stroud later, and I love just tapping into that offense. I think, Diggs seems to make sense to me at that spot.
Especially as a late third rounder. I mean, it might not be great for redraft, but he's going to have his weeks. Like that offense, like they're going to be great. He's going to have his weeks no matter what.
I know. So back to one of my questions again, so another whole show we'll do is veterans that were impacted, but I think we'll have to talk about them, the 49ers taking a first round receiver and Ricky Pearsall. Do you think if either of them are impacted, Brandon Ayuk versus Debo, are you worried about either of them, one more than the other?
I don't think either of them are going to get impacted like their price. I mean, I think that they're just going to sit right there in the back of the second round. Ayuk was going a little bit later than he went in this draft, like during our pre-draft drafts. But I don't think people are going to be sweating Pearsall too much. I think that's just the extent of my answer. I think they're going to sit there pretty firmly. And unless one of them gets dealt, I think the other one will come shooting up if one of them gets dealt. But for now, I'm comfortable with the price in the back of the second round. As we're on the clock again, who are you leaning here?
So I actually don't hate Etienne. They didn't draft anybody except like a special teamer running back, and they keep talking about lessening his workload, but Bigsby sucked last year, and I don't have a lot of Travis from our earlier drafts, and I don't know. I don't love any of these receivers.
Yeah, so I'm not in love with any of these receivers really either. My only other option would be Lamar, but I'm fine to go Etienne here.
Yeah, I was thinking Lamar as well, or maybe even Trey McBride.
Yeah, just hold off for Stroud.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping Stroud ends up ultimately falling to us. So I don't mind Etienne at all there. I consider him one of the sneaky veteran winners that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. They could have added a Braylon Allen. They could have added, one of these big body guys that could have eaten some touchdowns. And if Tank ends up getting a bigger role, okay, maybe they've talked about that, but they talked about all last preseason how big of a role Tank was going to have, and he sure didn't do a thing. Had Tank Dell fallen to us, I might have considered that. I know it's a little weird to have double Texans guys, but that's all about stacking this offense, and I would have been fine with that. But Tank Dell didn't fall, and I think Etienne is getting a little sneaky slept on at this point. I'm going to pull up actually my big board. I updated my best ball rankings today, so we can kind of reference that as we're going through the draft as well, because I think ADP is going to be kind of all over the place. That's kind of the fun of these early drafts. Because, for example, Rome Odunze is right there. Keenan Allen getting drafted right where he was before, but Rome's there now. Did Rome even get drafted already? Rome's sitting there at 44.
Yeah,
I have him right now in my 70s. For example, there's no way we're getting both of him and Keenan Allen as top 40 overall values. So maybe he overtakes Keenan Allen, but both those guys can't be going there, right?
No, the ADPs are going to be brutal, and we message back and forth a little bit about it. This is probably going to be one of the better times to take advantage of bad ADPs. Like the market's just not adjusting to the people that have been heavily impacted by the draft, and not everyone is going to need to or will have significant changes in ADP, but grabbing the guys who should be rising and haven't yet, and avoiding the guys who should be falling and haven't yet, it's going to prove to be pretty advantageous in my opinion. So I'm looking to put out a lot of my volume in terms of my draft numbers here in the next couple of weeks, right after the actual NFL draft, because his ADP is 44 for now. Obviously, it'll come down, and we'll see where Rome actually goes. But there's no reason it should be anywhere close to 44. I think where you have him in the 70s is far more accurate and reflective of where he's going to be drafted come August. So taking advantage of these bad ADPs. And some of the people who, there's not a lot of like the casual guys like in April still drafting, but there's definitely some people who will be listening to the ADP more than they should. So taking advantage of that now, I think will pay off pretty heavily in the long run for this season. But you've queued up a couple of guys. I don't mind either of those top three receivers there. I don't really want to go another running back, and none of the poor tight ends are really popping off the board to me.
Yeah, I was hoping Amari Cooper. I know you weren't a huge fan of him in our earlier drafts. He was somebody I started to kind of load up a little bit in round 5 on these later drafts. Because the more I thought about it, like he had an okay rapport going with Watson, but if something happens to Watson and he just doesn't pan out, we've seen Jameis just ball out and just chuck to his number 1. So I thought that floor was kind of baked in. I think Amari's still the clear number 1 there. He's got that best ball portfolio profile where it's 35-point days and 2-point days, but you don't have to worry about the 2-point days. So I've been liking Amari Cooper a lot in round 5. I was hopeful that he would fall to us. I don't mind Pickens at all, though. We've talked about the numbers without Deontay in the lineup, and they added Roman Wilson, but there's a world where Pickens is a clear-cut number 1 target hog there. Averaged like 1,400 yards and absurd touchdown rates in the games. without Deontay. And of course, that means season-long pace average of 1,400 yards. So I'm a big fan there of George Pickens as our wide receiver 3. He's kind of, you look at these like round 5 guys who could just explode, and he's one of the only ones that I could see like ascending to that number 1 monster still lingering around here. Whereas we kind of know more of the other guys, what their case is.
And I think his role is pretty insulated in that Pittsburgh offense. I don't think him and Roman Wilson are not going to be competing for the same looks whatsoever. And I wrote about it a little bit. I think he's going to be the beneficiary, or Pickens will be the beneficiary of the Russ Moonball that we saw so often in Seattle, and not so much in Denver, but here and there we saw that connection with Cortland Sutton on those Moonball shots. So those are obviously going to be going to Pickens, not Wilson. So especially in best ball, and like he's going to provide those spike weeks when he comes down with that big touchdown. So I don't mind that draft pick right there. And like you said, like he does have that untapped ceiling really in this range of receivers. There's not as many guys who have that kind of ceiling, and that's just kind of the nature of his play, that he's just a high upside guy. So I don't mind grabbing him in there. But we're setting ourselves up. All the elite tight ends are basically gone. I know you don't. I don't mind grabbing Kittle here, actually.
There goes Xavier Worthy, by the way. I don't mind Kittle at all either in this range. I will say I barely drafted any Terry McLaurin. I'm a little intrigued now with Jaden Daniels there. What that could mean for him. How much? Yeah. Any real preference between Kittle or McLaurin?
Yeah, I'm fine with that with McLaurin. It's the tight end fall off is just painful. But
I know. I don't mind. We could maybe get Evan Ingram. It is painful. I still really like the David Njoku range. Now that, like, for example, Raheem Mostert was the guy we kind of often went in this round 8 range. I don't know if I love it anymore with Jalen Wright now crowding that thing up. So where it had been like a must-draft running back range, and we already have 2 running backs on this roster, I don't mind getting a guy like David Njoku, was the number 1 tight end over the last 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Jake Ferguson, one of your favorite guys, and I also enjoy. I do, as we've talked a lot about in round 4, I do typically love getting my tight end. Where we took Etienne was often where we'd see Travis Kelce, and me and you would both lock him in. So, in drafts where Kelsey's not shooting up to 26 or 23 even, I think we can go there. I don't know if you even caught Xavier Worthy going at 64. Pretty healthy buy there at 64.
I can comfortably say I will be out at 64 if that's where he settles in.
Yeah, I ultimately have him at 78, I think. So I'm pretty high on him, but that is a little rich for me. Calvin Ridley's a guy I often am getting in this kind of round 6 receiver range. If it came down to him or McLaurin, I've almost always gone Calvin Ridley there. I consider him one of those kind of sneaky veteran winners where, they took a speedy receiver late, but ultimately it's him, it's Hopkins. They secured some linemen there, beefed up the line quite a bit. So I really like Calvin Ridley. I could see him doing some real damage. He's one of my favorite round 5-6 receivers at that turn there. The only other guy I was thinking was Addison, because we do have like Jefferson. We could go kind of all in on McCarthy and that stack, but he's already gone at this point. So I was gonna ask
you what you think about this tight end double tap from the guy in the 3 slot. We talked about it providing value, but I'm not so sure about it with Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts. I will say on Dalton Kincaid though, post draft, we didn't really mention it. It is seeming like I'm going to have to come around on Dalton Kincaid. It's seeming like it's going to be a given that
you've seen the light finally.
Yeah. Like, I think a fade on Dalton Kincaid would be far too detrimental, and because I think he could so easily lead that team in targets.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I feel similarly there. I don't know if I take him over Mark Andrews, which he went in our draft. I mean, you and me both love David Montgomery. I know we're pretty set at running back already. Oh man, it's hard not to take him right here, though. I'm a huge fan. What do you think? Montgomery?
I don't mind Montgomery. Yeah, or Njoku. but that's a little early for Njoku. So
yeah, I think we can get Njoku on the way back, and if not, we can always look at Ferguson. One running back I did want to talk about. Actually, I guess it kind of comes down to two. And we have 3 running backs, so I don't know that we're going to be looking at another back here. Although we could have like a 4-back build and then just not touch the position the rest of the time here. I wouldn't be overly opposed to that. Lad McConkey going to 81. That would have been an interesting pick. I wish we kind of thought about queuing him up. I have him right around 80 in my big board right here. So that could have been a receiver. I'm also going to mention Keon Coleman at this point, maybe at 89, trying to capitalize on that Bills value. You know, that's where A.D. Mitchell has often been going because people thought it was going to be him going there. So maybe we consider him. I don't know. The running backs, though, I was going to bring up were Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, just because, 2 first-round picks, or not a first-round pick and then a second-round pick right into the offensive line, right into the middle of it, too. Beefy guards, in addition to having Broderick Jones, a first-rounder last year. They're kind of rebuilding, getting back into that Steelers mentality of just grinding football. I know Najee is kind of ugly, but man, the way they added to that line, both him and Jalen Warren, I think get 2 big up arrows, and I don't think people are drafting him that way.
And he's just such a lock for carries. Like they're going to be ugly. Like you're not going to like it. It's not going to be any flashy production, but like at the end of the day, it's just so hard to come by week to week consistent volume from running backs in the NFL. And it seems like that's what you're getting with Najee. So it's not someone you want to be in on, but given the current state of running backs in the NFL, like he's just one of those few guys that you can just see the path for 15 carries a week every single week. So you can't, Who are you looking to queue up here? Keon?
I do like Najee. I think we talked about going to Njoku, and I don't hate getting like a nice tight end edge because we're probably looking at 3 quarterbacks. I don't know that we can do 3 QBs and 3 tight ends.
So probably grab one of the better tight ends.
Yeah, I'm cool going to Njoku here. Also because, Zamir White and Zach Moss, 2 of the biggest draft day winners, still going in that pick 100 range. I think one of them might make their way back to us. Then we can have our 4 backs and feel good. The other guys I was thinking of was Curtis Samuel. I mentioned also queuing up Keon Coleman. I don't know that he'll make it all the way back to us with our next pick. But 138 ADP, I think people might still be waiting on him. And there's a decent chance he could end up falling. There goes White. So he won't be making his way back to us. But here at 104, I wouldn't be shocked if we could sneak in a little Keon Coleman. And I worried if we took Curtis Samuel, that might wake people up to the Bills receivers a little bit too. So
where do you think the ADP shakes out for those Bills receivers? It's like, because Coleman's not like a good, like the people's opinions of Coleman as a prospect, I don't think are good enough for there to be like a massive gap between him and Samuel. What are you expecting for them in terms of where their ADP comes out?
I'm thinking Coleman ends up being the number 1 guy that in terms of draft capital that people go all in on. Maybe not though, because Curtis Samuel certainly has the higher floor. Like we know he's going to be involved. Last time he was with Joe Brady, he saw, the 4th most touches as a wide receiver. A lot of those came because of carries in the backfield. But I'm a big fan there of Curtis Samuel because we know he's going to get some touches. That being said, like Coleman's got that ceiling of if anyone's going to recreate close to what Diggs did and be a true number 1, Coleman's more so that guy, more so the touchdown scorer. So, I mean, I like them both, but I think ultimately Coleman's going to shake out as the higher drafted guy. Maybe not in this draft, but throughout the best ball process. And looking at my big board, I have Coleman right now at 94, and I have Samuel at 92. So I have them neck and neck. I have them both as good values if they fell to us right here. I do have, in terms of running backs, I did bump up Zach Moss even ahead of both those guys at 83. So he might be a guy that we end up looking at. I
don't mind.
We will see. We're pretty set at running back. So what'd you say?
I said I wouldn't mind Moss at this price, but yeah, we are pretty set at running back. But These wide receiver prices, we are getting into the range.
And there
I
he
would
goes.
like to firm up our wide receiver room because it is getting to that ugly point in drafts where there's a pretty significant drop off, and could argue we're already past that point. I'm fine with either of the Bills guys
I
here.
think we may be. I like going Curtis here, and then maybe even getting Keenan Coleman and just double tapping the
Just
Bills guys and
fully
kind of getting
off the Josh Allen drafter.
Yeah, exactly, because he's a little bit earlier in this draft. So there goes Coleman. So much for that dream.
Yeah. You had to see it coming right as the Bills start going off the board. Just someone else goes and grabs the other guy. I mean, that's kind of what you get with these drafts.
Yeah, I do feel safer about Samuel again, but Coleman I think is the ceiling play. This is that range where I don't mind. I know in one of our drafts we did it, and we ended up feeling pretty good about locking in just Jared Goff, even though we don't have a stack. It's kind of naked. It doesn't make a ton of sense. But it secures it that we don't have to go 3 quarterbacks if we don't want to get a nice safe floor like that. But man, seeing there goes Nick Chubb. I also don't hate Jonathan Brooks if he's there. Because we do have those 3 sturdy running backs that, we could have that patience with Jonathan Brooks for a later breakout. So yeah, what about you? What are your thoughts here on terms of Brooks, Goff, Lockett?
I would rather lock in the potential upside of Brooks, and then that basically closes us out at running back. Maybe grab one other guy in the last couple of rounds, but because I think of Goff as their ADP suggests on the screen right there as the similar tier to those guys, and I don't even mind waiting to grab a Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not rushing to get Goff ahead of these other guys. So I don't mind locking up Brooks there because I view Lawrence, Goff, Herbert, and Tua kind of all on the same plane. Just they're going to get there on your best ball team if they get 3 touchdowns in a week. Maybe on a week where one of them punches one in on the ground, you'll get there, and you're only really getting that out of Lawrence. These other guys aren't notable rushers. Herbert here and there, but not really. So I don't mind waiting on the quarterback because I view a lot of these guys pretty similarly. And then we're also setting ourselves up. Might as well get JJ in the queue. We're setting ourselves up for a JJ stack. And where is Hawkinson's ADP settling at right now? Because obviously it's just lower than it should be given the questions on his return. Because I don't think that he's going to be back for week 1. So pairing him up with JJ would not be a bad idea. And then just because we're already looking at we're looking at a 3 tight end build regardless. So I don't mind playing the long game and waiting on Hawkinson's return from injury and then having him to go along with JJ. And with Njoku already there, I think we can afford to withstand the weeks that Hawkinson is going to miss. You think you're comfortable grabbing Hawkinson sometime in the next couple of rounds?
I'm a big fan of it. Yeah, I've started to load up on him a bit because you're right. Maybe he's on the PUP, misses the first 4 weeks, but with this not having any type of regular season payouts, it's all going to matter in the playoffs. And Hawkinson's one of the very few tight ends that we've seen have 30-point days. And so if JJ is legit, if McCarthy is what we think, and we're already kind of building towards that stack here, then yeah, I'm all for it. I was, and there goes Goff. I was getting kind of excited that he might make his way back to us. I was hoping Jane Daniels because we do have McLaurin. That would have been a nice stack, but I think nailing Brooks here, a really exciting rookie that by mid-year will have that backfield to himself. I have him right neck and neck. He's my 86, and then Gus Edwards is my 87. So I thought both those guys were great values where they went. And I'd be intrigued to know, and then there goes Chase Brown, who I would have absolutely loved there.
That was a great value on Chase Brown. You want to shore up that first quarterback here?
We don't have a quarterback yet. Do we want to lock one up, or do we take Hawkinson here? And
I was asking if you want to shore up the first quarterback. Yeah.
I kind of want to go Hawkinson. I liked your case for him, and we know we're going to try to get McCarthy late. So
that's fine with me. Yeah.
That gives us 2 tight ends. Maybe we could get our guy Jonnu and have 3 later, but I feel like 4 running backs. I'm not convinced we're going to need another one here. And then
are you wanting to go?
Yeah.
So I'm just like thinking ahead here. Maybe we could go Roman Wilson, and then I don't know, try and play the Russell Wilson versus Fields game. Just like general roster construction thoughts here, because I'm just trying to think about like I don't really want a naked second quarterback of this like caliber, because like most of these guys kind of stink in terms of fantasy output. So I would prefer to have them stacked, and I think the Steelers stack is the one that we're going to be able to pull off here. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, but then you have to guess right, and like obviously the upside's big if you guess right, and it's particularly Fields. But I only like playing that game if you have like a locked in the Steelers QB game. That is, if you have like 2 guys you feel really good about, and then Fields falls and you get a nice value, okay. But I don't know that we could afford. And my guy Will Levis. I hate naked quarterbacks, but then at the end of the day too, I've been doing some reading on how it actually is like creates some differentiation, and it's a way to be different when like everybody that we have Kyron, so Stafford's not completely naked at that point, given that he threw a bunch of touchdowns to Kyron and the running backs.
Yeah.
And if he's playing, at least like usually one of them is going to be a big scorer, whether it's Kyron got the 3 touchdowns and so he's the big one in our lineup, or Stafford ended up throwing a bunch and sometimes 2 of them. So I'm kind of eyeing Stafford here.
And we can backdoor your guy.
But I think this guy has Puka in front of us, so I'm not overly optimistic here. But if he falls to us, he falls to us.
We could build out something with the Browns as well, with Njoku, and then I don't think that actually. I don't know. I don't know do they have any.
I don't even like Watson, but I saw like he was a top 12 quarterback in 3 of his 5 starts last year. So and Stafford comes to us, so I feel pretty good about that. I like him more than Kirk Cousins myself.
That's fine with me.
Singletary is intriguing up there, though. As somebody who should have been a big draft riser, falling 20 spots below his ADP. What do you think?
If you want to make that our last running back pick, yeah, that's fine with me. I wouldn't want to grab. I think Stafford actually.
Yeah, me too. We need a quarter. We know Stafford. We talked about him on our sleeper show that we talked about earlier, or best values rather. Over the second half of the year, he ended up being the quarterback 6 in the stretch run, and he's just 2 years removed from a 41 touchdown season, and touchdowns are volatile, and we saw those touchdowns return in the second half. There's a real world where he just does that all year next year, and we have the quarterback 7 from 2 years ago, the quarterback 7 from last year's second half. So yeah, that makes me feel a lot better about our QB situation to have like a nice floor baked in. Well, let me see where McCarthy's going, because we don't want to miss out on him. With our build, he's going to 190, and how many picks are in? So these are 18 compared to those. So we'd be looking at him probably at this 185 spot, and maybe one more QB mixed in here, I'd say.
Yeah, and then maybe, do you want to grab your boy DeMarcus for the Rams stack?
Of course. You know that.
Get him in the queue.
He'll be probably our later round pick. Yeah. My highest exposed player. What could go wrong?
Doesn't hurt to get just one more share, doesn't it?
No, never. I think I could see a world where my last 2 picks are almost always him and then Kamani Vidal. And I just load up on those 2 to round out best ball season. I mean, early best ball last year, like I said, I had at one point like 70% Tank Dell as my last round pick.
That is
he ended up, I came in at like 60%, but obviously that did not hurt my teams by having 60% of a monster receiver that last round pick. So
I can imagine that day he got hurt was semi-traumatic for you then.
Oh my God. That might've been the last time and only time I've cried in about like 7 years. Funerals don't do it for me, but Tank Dell getting lined up in the backfield as a fullback, that'll bring some tears. Yeah.
Not even do anything, just to push people around. Like,
it's
total nonsense.
Yeah. What are we freaking doing? But that was a tough one.
I think we've
got who we haven't talked about, and we I want to actually we haven't even been answering Krana's questions, who if you're still here after a 3-hour marathon, Krana, you're the absolute man. So let's start answering some questions. But the Cowboys backs we have to queue up here, and in particular Zeke Elliott. I have him at 130, I think, on the big board. He's going to be a running back too. It's hideous, but he's going to be a running back too. So I think we got to make sure we close in on that later as well. And that's why I don't think we're going to sniff another running back until probably the last 2 or 3 rounds. But I think we make it Zeke.
So I was going to say I wanted to make a fun stab at running back. Zeke's not a fun stab, but I think it's a smart stab. So
it's guaranteed volume and a top 4 offense in this league.
I mean, it's not guaranteed because he's a free agent, but
no, he got signed. He's there now. He signed today.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
did
he's
I
there.
Fully miss that? When did that happen?
This morning. Yeah, he's officially there.
I must have just fully missed that. All right. Then I don't see why not. Yeah. He's a shit. We should probably grab him earlier than the last round. I don't know how he hasn't been drafted yet, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, it does nothing. It's again naked, but I really do like Baker Mayfield here, like him and Stafford alternating 20-point weeks. I was hoping to go Drake May and then take a couple of his receivers late. If we're going receiver, I like Marvin Mims. I like my boy Will Levis too.
I just don't know how many we'll be able to take on the roster, and we're kind of setting ourselves up for Robinson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you want to just go Baker? Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's fine.
We don't have a choice at this point. There goes Baker. Yeah. So, yeah, I do think we want to address receiver sooner than later. But I like these 3 quarterback builds when, if you don't get a Josh Allen, you don't get a Jalen Hurts, you try to take 3 guys that, any given week you see 20-point upside. I think Baker and Stafford can absolutely produce 20 points on the blink of an eye, and then JJ McCarthy within the last couple rounds, I feel pretty good about as well. So, yeah, I mean, let's look at receivers. Let's try to queue up some guys. I thought Jalen Polk, we talked about him being a big draft day winner, so he's a guy that's going, 20 picks later, but I don't think we'll make it back to us. What are your thoughts on Dowdle versus Zeke? Now that Zeke's there, do you think this should be flipped with Dowdle and Zeke?
Yeah, I do. I think Zeke should be. I mean, we saw it in New England. He can get by just fine with a large workload still. And I don't like that. I think he's better than Rico Dowdle, but I don't think Rico Dowdle is a very good player. I don't think he's a player that's proven capable or worthy, in terms of his skill, to be a 1A in a backfield. I do think this is going to look like a 1A, 1B type of deal. That's seeming like the most likely outcome, but I think it should be Zeke that's getting drafted first. And we'll have to wait and see this is going to be one of those backfields where the offseason, footnotes from the coaches and stuff are going to be super important. But I think Zeke. Who are you liking here to grab a receiver?
I love Marvin Mims here. I like getting him last round, and I like him even more. I know the skill set with Troy Franklin is similar, and you got Bo Nix with the already established rapport. So there's some concern with Mims, but they talked a lot about why they traded Judy was because they felt so good about Mims, and you saw some huge weeks last year on about 20% of the snaps. So should he become an even 70% snap player, I think Mims has real breakout potential, and there's just not a lot of that right now at receiver. There's very few receivers at this point that I even like drafting at all. I queued up a few of them. I like Corley, as we talked about, with that potential Randall Cobb role. I like Javon Baker. I could see him actually being the number 1 over Jalen Polk, even though Polk had the draft capital. It wouldn't shock me at all. At least Baker himself is talking like he's the number 1. And at this point of the year, I'll take all the hype. And I like Demarcus Robinson late as well. So, maybe 2 to 3 more receivers. Those are the only 3 that we talked about. Malik Washington liking the player, but not liking the situation. Well, there's really no one else I even want to sniff at receiver. So
how many picks do we have left? Only 3?
I think we have 4 at this point. Yeah, 4 more left. So probably 2 more receivers, 1 more with JJ McCarthy and Zeke.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
What about Zeke at this point? 176.
I'm fine grabbing him here.
Assuming if he makes it to us, I think I think by the end of summer, Zeke's going to be going like 100.
That's what I was about to say. I bet you he's going around round 10, like, or maybe even earlier. Yeah, 100's even earlier than that. That's like round 8. But yeah, I don't. It's just the path is so clear to getting almost all the carries. It's just like he's like one of those guys. Like he's just like one of those dead zone running backs. Like I always think back to like Mike Davis that year. He like came off of a solid year replacing Christian McCaffrey in Carolina, and then he gets signed with Atlanta, and everyone was like he's a shoe-in for volume. Like, but he was going in like the 4th or 5th round of fantasy drafts. But then we have Zeke here, and we're about like could grab him in the 15th round. Like I don't. It seems like too good to be true to me, honestly. Like someone might have to talk me off this Zeke ledge. If his price holds around here, I can just see myself with a concerning amount of Zeke on my teams.
I know Estime was the one I went head over heels for and had 40% of, but my second highest owned running back was Zeke at 32%.
I did see that slip in your screenshot that you put out.
I made sure to just get a little bit enough to show that I wasn't completely insane with him. So, fingers crossed. Hopefully he makes it to us here. We got 2 5 running back teams in front of us, so I feel okay about the shot of him getting here. We'll see. But I'm with you. He was the running back 7, and Dobbins going there. I am intrigued by Dobbins. I know the injury concerns as well. But Zeke was the running back 7 once he took over as the starter for the Patriots last year. 8 volume produced with it, and now he's going to the number 1 scoring offense, not the bottom 3 offense. Maybe Dowdle. Yeah, I think we got to go him because he's the type of guy. The more we talk about him, it's like if we don't get him, I'd be upset. So I'm just going to take him. That rounds out our running back room very, very nicely, in my opinion. I mean, we're going to have 2 to 3 running backs in our lineup. I mean, obviously, you have 2 every week, but like,
I would hope so.
Yeah, but like, I feel like we're going to have 2 strong running backs every week is kind of what I'm getting at. And the potential for like 3 15 to 20 point RBs each and every week. And then when Brooks finally starts to take off, I'm telling you, this for a best ball, like our first best ball mania team, I'm feeling really good about this squad.
I mean, I expected this to be a little bit of like a trial by fire type of deal, just like feeling it out as we go. But yeah, it's going like for our first one. Yeah, I think it's going pretty smoothly. Like obviously, like there's gonna be like getting your bearings down for like ADP and like roster construction, as there always is with these types of tournaments. But I think it's going pretty smoothly. But I'm sitting here like mind boggled by the fact that Ezekiel Elliott is on an NFL team and J.K. Dobbins went ahead of him.
Yeah. Well, Dobbins is on the Chargers now, too.
Yeah, I know he's on a team, but, like, he hasn't done anything in the NFL. He's, like, in a committee. Like, I understand that, yeah, he's on an NFL roster, but, like, holy crap. Like, how is he going behind Zeke? But that's enough of that. Looking like we're going to have to either grab JJ or one of a receiver here. If you like Corley, I'm fine going Corley.
I love going Corley. I will say this, though, to balance out Hawkinson being injured, I love Jonnu this year, too.
Yeah, just not grab one more. Yeah,
one
I think that's fine with me.
I feel okay with our receivers, and more so with the running backs, that I don't think there's going to be many weeks we're going to need 4 receivers. And so, between Jefferson being in our lineup every single week, Diggs and Pickens probably most weeks, one of them will be in there. And then like Terry, Curtis, and Mims, I feel pretty good. Yeah. And if we didn't go McCarthy, I know we got to go McCarthy. I feel like 3 quarterbacks is kind of necessary. It was more so I just love that value on Jonnu. Like, I've been taking him at 170 to get him at 185. I like it a lot. I think we're going to have a nice balance of Jonnu and Njoku, keeping us nice and sturdy till when Hawkinson comes back. And if he really gets his legs under him for the playoffs, and we've made it, like I don't know. Jonnu's become one of my highest owned tight ends quite quickly. So
I can see why. I mean, just like it's the perfect punt tight end. Like not even if you punt, like we've got some solid tight ends on this roster. It's just like the path. Like you can just like make the case to yourself so easily in your head. Like I completely see why you're getting to him a ton, and I'm getting a lot of them. I don't know what you're at exposure wise to him right now. I don't think I'm nearly as high as you, but like the case to be is like very easy to make. So I understand why you're getting there a lot, and like why not grab what seems like is going to be the clear tight end one in one of the more explosive offenses in the league. I mean, especially at this price in the 16th round, like why not?
I don't know if you saw it and why I just moaned in pain.
Yeah.
But
That was brutal.
Demarcus Robinson.
So nobody left to stack with Stafford. We could go McMillan, I guess. I don't really like for the
But if we're gonna go for a Tampa Bay guy, I'd honestly rather go Trey Palmer.
Yeah, that's probably a bet. We'll see who's there at receiver. I think we gotta go JJ before he gets swiped.
The only other thing I agree with you too completely. As long as JJ's there, we're gonna go him. Just looking through the receivers, I didn't like the landing spot for Johnny Wilson in Philly. I don't see much of a path to year one playing time.
No.
Odell Beckham's going to sign at some point, and there's been some rumblings lately that it might be with the Bills. So that's another one, kind of like Zeke, you know what I mean? Where it's like once he's somewhere, he's going to be getting drafted like 4 rounds ahead of where he's going now. So there's no way he's out of the NFL.
No chance. So
now Tyron Tracy, no, we're not going running back, but I just wanted to see if he wasn't in the big board drafts. Other guy, this is maybe galaxy brain.
Bills today.
But yeah, Jarvis Landry working out with the Jags right now.
It was the Jags, right? Yeah, the Jags. Yeah. He's going to rookie camp. That's insane.
I've always been a Landry guy. I'm in love with the fact that he's going to rookie camp, and like I'm here to prove myself. I'll shout this out too. I think Conklin, we talked about running, veteran risers, huge veteran riser. And one guy that's a huge veteran riser that is one of my boys that nobody's talking about is Mr. Donald Parham Jr. So we already have 3
today,
yeah, we have 3 tight ends already, so we're obviously not going him here. But Conklin with no Bowers landing there, probably the number 3 target for Aaron Rodgers this year, and then of course Parham. I know Hayden Hurst is there, but Hayden Hurst hasn't done a thing in God knows when.
People were saying he was going to retire because of like brain injuries. Like I'm just shocked he's back playing football. But
we got to lock up McCarthy here, right?
Yeah, gotta go JJ. Yeah,
and I love Will Levis again, and I have Will Levis ahead of JJ in my rankings, but obviously team construction wise, with Jefferson, with TJ Hawkinson. We're banking on like a week 17 just explosion against the Lions like last year.
Yeah. In the dome, hopefully.
Exactly. It's a good chance of a dome game between the Vikings and within their division too. So now we just got to pick a receiver. And again, I queued up a few of my favorites. Boyd will land somewhere. He didn't sign with Cincy, right?
No, he has not signed anywhere.
Yeah. I'm surprised he hasn't signed anywhere, to be honest.
I mean, if nothing happens, like there's a world where he comes back to Cincy on like the most minuscule deal you've ever seen. But I'm not super interested in him. I don't think he is a difference maker at this point in his career. I'd rather take some higher upside stabs than an unsigned slot receiver.
I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
So here's a few guys I've queued up. And they're like the 10-second take for any of them. Trey Palmer stacking with Baker, downfield roll. Something happens to Evans. Oof, then he could take off. Beckham, if he signs with the Bills, he's going 8 rounds ahead of this, maybe even more. Landry, same idea. No one's going to draft him until he signs, so maybe we just wait. Same idea with DJ Chark, though. Visited the Chargers. If he signs with the Chargers and becomes the deep threat for Justin Herbert in a vertical offense, I mean, he had some 25-point spikes with Bryce Young as his QB last year, so Chark still intrigues me. Brendan Rice got drafted by the Chargers, and as much as we love Ladd and think Ladd's going to be that guy, still there's a role where Jerry Rice's son could end up getting himself some meaningful targets out of Herbert. So those are a few guys. I don't like Boyd until he's not somebody I'm really looking at right now. And Slayton, of course, he had some big games. He's good for 3 to 4 15-point days at some point this year. Even with Neighbors there, probably still has a couple big days in him. So of these receivers, I'll let you choose who I made the case for him. Which would you most like to see us go?
I will have to put the veto on Jarvis Landry. That is not a player I'm interested in at this point in his career, or just I'm going to go I'm gonna go Trey Palmer just so we don't have the. I like him. When Odell signs, I would bet that I'll have him ahead, but I don't like.
You don't want to take the stab on Odell then when he signs? The way you just said that.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
It's more fun.
It's much more fun. It's the first draft. We can worry about stacking. It's not even May yet. We'll worry about that in May, I guess. We'll worry about properly stacking our quarterbacks and all that. We'll wish past some of the Bills and hope for that.
Exactly. With McMillan landing with the Bucks too, I know he's a different kind of skill set and player than Palmer, but like it's not like McMillan can't play outside. And I like Palmer. I like what he did as a rookie. But to me, it's like Beckham is guaranteed to go up in value, whereas Palmer's going to always be there for us in the last rounds. And then maybe Beckham doesn't sign, and it's like, damn, we shot ourselves in the foot. And first draft of the year, though, so who knows? Some interesting picks, though, late, like Will Dissly. We talked about the Chargers tight end. I think that should be Donald Parham. I don't know about that. I like taking a stab at the Chargers tight end situation, but I don't know about that. I like Will Levis at 200, man. I was taking him at 160 through a lot of this offseason.
That is
this team did a lot of interesting things here. 177, Ray Davis. I like that. I don't like Michael Mayer, though, at all at that pick.
That seems like a wasted pick.
Wasted pick at all. I'll tell you, I mean, I know we're about to go through the team grade in a second. Where did you stand on Curtis Samuel versus Keon Coleman? Like, which one would you have preferred there?
Right now, I just want to say Curtis Samuel just because of the unknown of Keon Coleman. But I think I'm going to come around to Coleman just because of the upside and just the role that he more likely or will likely play in this offense. I just think it'll be conducive to producing in best ball and just having those spike weeks. And the touchdown equity is much more in the favor of Coleman, which is like one of the biggest correlation factors to having spike weeks in best ball. So I think over the course of the offseason, I don't even think over the course of the offseason, I think pretty quickly I will have Coleman ahead of Sanders. But I don't think it's like how you have your rankings right now. I don't think it's like I think it's pretty likely that they're going to end up in terms of like their ADP in a spot where they're going to be pretty smushed together, and you're just going to be able to pick and choose who you want, like of the Bills receivers. So I'm thinking I'm going to just like be mixing them in just because the ADP is so similar. But I think with the upside of Coleman and the potential touchdown equity, I'll probably be going Coleman more often than not. But we'll see where the ADPs shake out, but guessing that they're going to be pretty tight.
Yeah, I think I'm exactly how you view the situation. I was hoping because it's so early and Coleman's ADP was 138 that we might be able to get them both and backdoor, a double stack there, even without Josh Allen. Obviously, it didn't happen here, and I do imagine Coleman's going to keep coming up to the point where he might be beating out Samuel. But that being said, Samuel, we got him 10 picks after his ADP, and I don't see any reason why his ADP should be going down after the draft, because if Coleman sucks, if he's Kelvin Benjamin 2.0, like a lot of people think, I guess Kelvin Benjamin had like 13 touchdowns as a rookie, so that wouldn't be the worst thing either. But, for his career arc, if that's the case, I imagine Coleman's going to be the guy I go more often. But you can like see both scenarios where training camp, it's like Coleman red zone drills absolutely dominant and he spikes. Or you could see Curtis Samuel, most active player throughout camp, like getting 1 million targets lining up all over the place. And he goes up by 10 rounds, or not 10 rounds, by 10 ADP. I think just mixing them in is the right play for right now. And certainly I think getting Coleman, he's the one I could see going like around 70 by the time draft season's.
Yeah,
really
he's the one that's going to come up if anyone does.
Yeah. Maybe in hindsight we go Coleman over Curtis Samuel, but overall, I mean, I love Justin Jefferson. We know who his QB is now, and I like it. I like McCarthy. Kyron at 17, anywhere mid-second. I know Corum's added, and I don't care. I think it's more of a handcuff. I think Kyron, sure, touchdown equity might go down a little bit, but receptions-wise, that's why I like the Stafford pick too, kind of correlated there. I think Diggs this late in the second, I like it a lot.
Yeah, third round, not the second.
Yeah, third round Diggs there. Yeah. I think is great. One thing I've been seeing is like people have been talking about the CJ Stroud, like making his perfect offense and how he picked Tank Dell for his slot receiver, in addition to like Devontae Adams. And I forget who else the other guy was, but it wasn't Dickinson. It wasn't Nico Collins. So some people are saying, Tank Dell is the guy just because of that one clip. Little absurd.
That's a lot of leaps and jumps to make in terms of one random clip into fantasy production. But
agreed.
I mean, it is the fantasy football community that we're a part of, and there are a lot of leaps and jumps that are made every single off season. So, you can't be too shocked that people are saying that that's going to impact their fantasy performance.
Yes.
But I think Diggs in the third round is a good price. I mean, I expected him to settle in kind of at that 1-2 turn along with Nico Collins. I thought they were going to be kind of some of how we were just talking about with Samuel and Coleman. I thought they were going to be kind of pick and choose who you want in the same spot and just kind of try and diversify. But if he's like significantly behind behind Nico Collins, I don't mind snatching Diggs up there. And if he settles into the third round, I think that's someone that I will be getting a lot of.
Yeah, 100%. I love that for him. I didn't get a ton of him in early best ball because he was going like where you were saying in the second round turn here. And I was more often going the 49ers guys. But yeah, if he's mid third, I'll be loading up all day. It would have been nice to have the Stroud fall to us. Obviously, did not happen here. But we ended up with Pickens as a result. And I like Pickens at that price. Don't have a ton of Etienne, but again, I think he's one of the draft's bigger winners that nobody's talking about, avoiding any meaningful running back additions. Terry, another guy that I didn't have a lot of in early best ball, and coming out with Jaden Daniels and not a lot of more added target competition, I think he could be a big winner. My love for Montgomery, and anytime you can get him in round 7.
He was going earlier than this in the pre-draft competitions. So I was kind of happy to see him there in the 7th round. That's where his price was last year when I was pounding my fist on the table. And obviously, like you can make the case for like the Gibbs like making another step and taking more away from Montgomery, but still he was a tremendous value last year in the 7th, and I don't think his value has taken so much of a hit that I would be against drafting him in the 7th round. I mean, you know what you're getting. You're going to get 15 carries a game, and like sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, depending on the game script and how Gibbs is running that given week. And the touchdowns will come and go, but he's going to get them regardless. Yeah. So just like it's just such an easy case to make as a floor player on your roster, especially at running back, where it's hard to find those floor guys where you're going to get production. But unless he gets hurt, you're getting production out of David Montgomery. So always happy to have him in those middle rounds to complement some of the bigger chances that we take on running backs.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I thought that was a great value on him. I will point out, like, Kenneth Walker falling to 76. I don't understand that at all. All they did was beef up the line. So they didn't add any weapons, that are going to take away from him. They just added multiple linemen. Ben Grubb, the offensive coordinator coming in, was a line coach one day, back in the day. I think that's an insane value. Had he been here at 80, I would have lost my mind. I would have even considered him here at 65, where we took McLaurin if we hadn't already taken so many running backs. Then we got Njoku to get a nice quality tight end 1. Thought that was a great move. I'm trying to see. I thought Zamir White. You see Mostert now starting to fall. I think Warren, this is a great price on 96.
That is a phenomenal price.
That's a phenomenal price tag.
I'm taking him ahead of Mostert now.
You take him ahead of who?
I'm taking Warren ahead of Mostert now.
Yeah, it's a 2-back committee, whereas Mostert's now looking at a 3-back nightmare. Yeah. And if anything ever happened to Najee, my God, like Warren's winning your league for you at that point. So I think that's a great price on him. I would have, had we not needed a tight end, he's another one to consider here. But I thought Najee at 90. Again, that line, I don't think people are recognizing how big adding 2 round 1 and 2 linemen are for a line that was already getting beefed up. Now you add 2 more, just Steeler ball. Arthur Smith loves to run the rock. Yeah. Like this is going to be a Najee and Warren going this late is going to be steals. So I think both those guys are guys. Yeah.
The Najee argument's the David Montgomery argument just on a worse offense. Like that's literally all it is. Like you're going to get carries every single week out of that guy as long as he's healthy. So,
some receiving upside too. I mean, his rookie year, he had like 90 freaking catches. So, there's even more of it. Honestly, I think Montgomery's a little bit safer because it's a better offense, but there's a very easy path for Najee to be a higher ceiling than Montgomery. to
It's
go
just
10
like,
picks later.
yeah, it's just seeming like it's setting up like another year where just like waiting on running backs, like, and just looking to solidify with a floor guy, either grabbing
Yeah.
Montgomery in the 7th or then just waiting and grabbing Najee after that.
A dream situation here would have been had Adams been here at 17 and we did Jefferson, Adams, Diggs, and then still got this backfield. Like I would have thought it was probably our best draft yet. And
That would have been
to
sweet.
kick off best ball season would have been damn sexy that way. I'm fine that it didn't, but that would have been I don't love our receivers enough that we only have 7. That's if there's one shortcoming of this team, it's certainly
Definitely.
the receivers.
Which is not standard for us.
No, it's not. Normally we are big on the receivers. And I'm trying to think of like what we could have done differently. I mean, I wouldn't have changed the Brooks pick here. There's no receivers that went after him. Maybe Tyler Lockett, but I would have much rather had Brooks's upside. I love the Hawkinson pick. I'm cool with that there. I know we needed quarterbacks. So we took Baker here, Jalen Polk, but that's an unknown. I like where we got Mims. That's the receiver I honestly was considering at 152. I love where we got Zeke. So Jonnu was a bit of a luxury pick. We could have maybe gone Corley because I do really like Corley. I guess a lot of it hinges on Beckham. If he comes back and lands with the Bills with a explosive offense and he'll start going in this range, then then okay, we're good with wide receivers. I thought obviously we had to go McCarthy with the build. So yeah, I think one more receiver. I think if we could have had, who would you have replaced Kyron with? I know Adams would have been ideal, but he wasn't there. I didn't feel great about any of these guys at a round 2 receiver.
I can make the case to myself for Ayuk and maybe Olave, but that's about it for me.
Yeah, especially Olave too. I could see.
I'm not upset with the Kyron pick. It definitely would have been nice for either Adams or London to be there, and like just because of knowing now what we got at running back in the later rounds, I think we would have been fine without Kyron there. But I'm not too mad about it. I mean, like with the first draft, just like trying to get a feel for where everyone's falling, and then just trying to pick out the guys that I think are going a little too late, and just kind of earmarking those guys, because like I said, I'm going to be drafting a ton over these next 3 weeks because I don't think the market's going to catch up. Like this is hour 5 of best ball. So we are very, very early on in the process. So I'm expecting there to be some really bad ADPs out there. And I think we saw some in this draft, but just adjusting as you get more and more drafts under your belt. Like I'm not sweating this first one too much, but just making sure, like, understanding where the market's going and just adjusting to make sure that you're ahead of those ADP curves, because ADP is going to fluctuate now more than ever. Like maybe the most fluctuation will come like in training camp, but it'll definitely be fluctuating now more than it will the rest of the off season other than training camp. So now is like the best time to take advantage. So I'm just trying to stay ahead of the curve and just like keep my eyes on drafts, even if like they're not mine, just like taking a quick glance through people's drafts that they put on Twitter and just like seeing where guys are going and trying to take advantage of those faulty ADPs, because I don't think like there's much better time than now to be taking advantage of mispriced guys.
Absolutely. So we got a few comments here. If you got to run, that's more than fine. We're approaching hour 3 here, so I get it. Hey, what better way to celebrate the best ball season kicking off? So Krana asking, and hopefully all you guys that are asking your questions are still here. And if you're also with us and want to get some questions in, by all means, start asking away, because we're happy to answer anything you got. But Krana saying, happy for my Bears with 3 great wide receivers. Would you still pick more round 3 or 4? Yeah, I think so, but closer to the round 3-4 turn than before, where it was like a kind of round 2 lock for me. I loved him with the idea of Caleb Williams, him and Keenan Allen. I thought would be great. Now that Rome's there, I think it is going to be a bit messy, so it does become more of a round 3-4 turn. And we saw in our draft, I believe he went still in like the late second, if I'm not mistaken, for him. So where are you comfortable with DJ Moore?
Where did he go in our draft?
He went actually where we took Diggs. He went the next pick. So yeah, I guess that's right about right. Where if Diggs wasn't there, I think Moore I would have been happy with there. But
I would say round 4 is where I'm fine with him. I question his ability to earn targets over these guys. And I think it's going to be a lot like the Texans offense, like in the sense that all of the guys are good and they're going to cannibalize each other, and it's just going to result in them. It's going to be a nightmare for redraft, but thankfully in best ball, we're not like sweating that too much. So just given the volatility, I think like I'm comfortable with him in the round 4 range. I think he has the most upside and like edge in terms of earning volume over the in terms of these 3 receivers. I think he has the clearest path to being the top dog, but the volatility, just given the volatility, I think round 4 is a solid price for him.
Yeah, and when I look at this too, like choosing Diggs versus DJ Moore, like you said, the situation is very similar. 3 very talented guys eating each other's cheese. Which one do I want more? Well, I'll take the CJ Stroud that I've already seen. You know, if Caleb Williams ends up being what CJ Stroud was, and there's a ceiling, the way people talk about him, that he might even be better. Okay, yeah, sure, that might exist. But we already know CJ Stroud is filthy and probably will be taking his game to yet another level next year. So I'll go with the proven guy in a similar situation versus tying myself to the QB that we don't know quite yet. Probably going to be great, but I'd rather have Diggs for sure there. So yeah, great question, Krana. I would probably say, and he asked about the other 2 receivers, like I'd say more round 5, 6 for Keenan Allen, and then round 7, 8 for Rome. They're all so talented. And again, we're just going to be relying on Caleb Williams to be that good from there. Good to see Herbert get a good with Lane, Ladd, you probably met. It's a Lane, McConkey. But yeah, Ladd's going to be great there. I saw another comment here that from Kazi praying that Ladd plays out of the slot, give him that Keenan production. And I think that's where he absolutely will play a bunch of his snaps. I think
he can play everywhere.
He can play everywhere, which is the nice part. And so in 2 receiver sets, he'll be outside. And in 3 receiver sets, you kick him in. So I think Ladd will definitely get some slot snaps. I think he'll eat there, and I think he'll get some outside snaps, and he's going to eat there. Like, I loved where we got Montgomery, but honestly, like after the way I saw our team kind of turn out, Ladd at 81 right after us kind of slapped me in the face. I probably could have considered Ladd there as much as I love Montgomery. So yeah, I thought that. Yeah, that's a good one to note. Like when I do my next draft in about 5 minutes, I'll probably consider
exactly
Ladd there for sure. So then we were at Krana asking about Zeke, and like you saw here tonight, we got him in round 15. But I would ultimately, I bet you he ends up settling closer to round 10. Honestly, by the time draft season's rolling around, like really in the heart of it. Again, running back 7 when he was a starter last year on a worse offense, and maybe there's more cheese nibbling with Rico Dowdle because he did see about 80% of the snaps and touches with the Pats. Don't know that we can pencil him right in for that, but I mean, really, it's Rico Dowdle. Like, I don't know that. Maybe Rico Dowdle was the winner, but everyone's hyping him up, and like we've just seen Zeke. I see all the people tweeting out like worst pro football grade of his career, PFF like rushing grade and bad protection rate, and all that's true. Maybe like it might have been the least efficient Zeke year. I don't care if he's getting me fantasy points. And he was a running back 1. He literally put up 30 points one week. And the next, he had a 26-point week in there. And then he never dipped below 13 points when he was the starter. Like he just kind of ate. And again, this is on a bad Patriots team. This is a better Cowboys offense that just loaded up on linemen again. And Jerry Jones is coming with that. I think Zeke's is still a quality starter in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I've been dogging on Zeke for years. I've called him dust for years, wash for years. But he seems like a gimme to have like 15 carries a game, maybe more. 12, I don't want to say that. Maybe 12 to 15 carries a game, maybe more. Yeah. But still, like, get that kind of almost guaranteed production in the 15th round, like, sign me up every single time. Like, it'll all depend on, like, to what level the Cowboys decide they should be feeding Zeke. But the competition of Rico Dowdle does not scare me like that much. I think he will have some role in some capacity, but I think Zeke is the 1A from day one, and he's just a gimme for touches. And in the 15th round, sign me up every single time.
Absolutely. And we'll keep moving through these questions, guys. Just wanted to do one last plea, though, with over 300 of you here with us. If you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, I know a lot of you guys are coming in from Twitter. Love to see it. Thank you so much for being here and watching this. We are trying to grow that YouTube channel. So whether you prefer to watch us on Twitter, if you don't mind, though, jumping over to YouTube, hitting the thumbs up, subscribing, boosting those numbers with us. Oh, man, we'd love this. We're going to do this pretty much every Monday, 4 p.m., doing these live drafts, and love to have you guys continue to be with us for all of them. We'll be going live at other times of the year. We're going to try to get really scheduled and figure that out. We know the Truth wants to get back going with us as well. So we will be doing this a bunch. So if you don't mind subscribing over on YouTube and hitting that thumbs up button, helping us grow over there as well. Love to have you on Twitter. Of course, watch where you prefer, but it takes 2 seconds to get over there and sub and like it. Man, it would mean the world for us. And we already talked about JJ over Drake, and I would actually agree with that take. I have JJ ahead of Drake in my rankings, and we got JJ McCarthy, 30 picks after Drake May went? So, yeah, I'm with you, Krana. Especially with our team build, it made sense. Marvin Harrison, round 2, yep, and I would put him ahead of every single guy you listed by a mile. Drake London's the only one that's like somewhat close for me, and I still would have Marvin Harrison a tier ahead of Drake London. You feel similarly there?
He's going to be pretty tight in ADP with London. I mean, I think both of us are a little bit more down on London than consensus. But other than London, this Marvin Harrison is going to be drafted tens of picks ahead of these other guys. It doesn't sound that much when I'm like saying it out loud, but in the first couple of rounds, it's a pretty wide margin.
Absolutely. And I see myself loading up on a lot of, like, if I'm in the back end of round 1, doing a lot of Marv, Devontae Adams. The way this draft unfolded, at least, like looking at some of these running backs, the Steelers guys in round 8, I know we were down a little bit more on Mostert, but still in round 9 range for him, and Zach Moss round 10, and Zeke round 15. Some of these running backs that you can get, like, as much as I love Jahmyr Gibbs back there, as much as I had loved Kyron Williams, I think a lot of my BBM later rent, if I'm like 11, 12, is going to end up being a lot of Marv, Drake London. I mean, Marv,
a lot of double tap at receiver.
Marv, Devontae Adams, and I guess Drake London I could mix in there too, but give me Marv and give me Devontae over him for sure. It's weird, but I kind of consider Adams a winner in the sense that, like, Minshew's it feels unsexy, but like it was whose podcast was it? I think it was Dwayne McFarland was talking about it with Ian Harditz. And he was saying how, rookie quarterbacks picked 1 through 3 average 220 or whatever the exact number was, whereas Gardner Minshew averaged 250 passing yards across his last 3 years whenever he's the starter. And because someone was asking, like, how much better would Devontae Adams be if they take a Penix? And he's like, well, at pick 13, those quarterbacks have averaged only 200 yards, and Minshew, again, 50 more yards than that. Like, that makes a big difference. So weirdly, like, Minshew's not very sexy, but then you look and see that he fed Michael Pittman 150 targets last year. That, DJ Chark had 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns with Minshew his rookie year. So I'm not worried about Adams with Minshew. I think he can still get fed. And I think Bowers is a nice compliment, but he's not going to take away, we'll still see 150 targets go. I love Adams. I think he kind of came away as a weird winner, even though it might not seem like it because he didn't get an upgrade. He kind of did. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with Minshew. He's shown the ability to feed a wide receiver 1. But moving on to this next comment, I will be crying if Malik Neighbors finishes with 5 to 7 targets a game. That would be absolutely brutal.
The only case for him doing anything is volume, right? Like, it's not going to be quality volume, so we need a lot of it.
Yeah, so you're hoping for like double-digit targets. That's not realistic. I mean, like some games, sure, but I think 8 is a comfortable number for like.
You think about it though, their defense sucks. Barkley's gone. That's 370 touches last year. If it's only 5 to 7 targets a game, are they only running like 15 plays a game? Because who the hell else are you going to give the ball to? Devin Singletary, maybe a little bit, but like no other receiver. Waller's probably retiring. Like, Neighbors should be seeing 10 plus targets, and I have faith in Daboll that he probably will.
Daboll will be burned at the stake if their number 6 pick in the draft does not get more. I I just say I think 9. Yeah, like 9 targets game on average. Like I think he breaks double digits here and there, but most games I think he averages 8 or 9 a game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Dane, good to see you. A comma. Thanks for the insightful comma. Would love to see some more writing from you, Dane. I don't know how you've been, brother. Would love to get you back going, though. Your stuff's always great, and I'd love your dynasty takes on some of these guys here. Coleman, true X receiver, great pick by the Bills. I agree, Kazi. I thought it was a prime landing spot. In hindsight, we talked about some of the things we would have done differently on this draft. I probably would have gone back and taken Coleman over Curtis Samuel. I think I was getting a little greedy thinking we could maybe get both of them. And yeah, whatever. In most cases, I am going to probably take Coleman over him, though. And you said you kind of agreed with that, right, Mo?
Yeah, that he's going to be the true X. I mean,
yeah. Coleman, yeah.
There's no other option, really.
No.
Once again, we will have an offensive coordinator burned at the stake if Curtis Samuel is the X receiver in that offense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be Coleman. Looking forward.
The only counter I will say though, and we talked about it. Last time Joe Brady had Curtis Samuel, he had the 4th most touches among receivers. Like we probably get more targets going to Coleman, but like touches wise, Curtis Samuel is going to get his fair share.
He's going to get his, and that's why I mean, like, there's a reason we had that debate about who's going to be back or in terms of like what their ADPs should be. But yeah, Coleman will play the X role. He's going to be like the big vertical guy. So. Yeah, they drafted him for a reason, and they know exactly what they want to do with him.
Absolutely. And then I think we already pulled up the fact that we hope that Ladd plays in the slot. Agreed, he'll play all over the place, including dominating out of the slot. So the last question we have here, help a guy out. I hope you're still here for the memes. I hope you're here for your answer here for the memes. Your team is Kirk Cousins, AJ Brown, Swift, Eckler, Andrews, Stevenson, Ingram. Would you trade Trevor Lawrence, Metcalf, and a 25 first for CJ Stroud? Ooh, that's some hefty capital. That being said, your roster is great. It's kind of built for now. And but like Eckler, Swift, I don't love your running backs. Stevenson, okay. Your running backs aren't amazing. I have a hard time. So I guess a little bit depends on like how early do you project that first to be. I personally, I'll admit it here for the memes. I have not done any studying on the 25 class. I'm still trying to catch up to speed on all the 24 landing spots. So even if you told me it was like the 103, I would have no idea who's actually going at the 103 and 25 drafts. So I'd have to study up a bit more. All I know is Lawrence and Metcalf plus probably a decent pick because it's a first. As much as I do love Stroud, I think you're giving up a lot. And like your team is good, but it's not a team where it's like I'm a Stroud away from a guaranteed title, in my opinion. That's my gut reaction here. What do you think? I know you don't do a ton of Dynasty, Mo.
Yeah, no, I'm no Dynasty guy, but yeah, I think I kind of agree with that last little bit that you said there. This seems like a type of move that you make if you're a CJ Stroud away from a championship. And if that's the case, like I guess go ahead and do it. But yeah, this seems like a bit much. It seems like with the roster that you have, like you're a fringe contender and like could win if things break right for you. But this seems like a move to like that you make to set yourself up to be a juggernaut. And this does not seem to be a juggernaut roster. I mean, like all around a good roster, but not the move that you make when you have this kind of roster. But then again, yeah, I'm no huge Dynasty guy. And I also am not super well informed. But the extent of my knowledge of the 2025 class is that Shedeur Sanders is currently the favorite to be the #1 pick on DraftKings, which is the biggest crime I have ever seen in my entire life. If there was a way to bet against him being the #1 pick, I would put my life savings on Shedeur Sanders not being the #1 pick next year. But yeah, it seems like a little bit aggressive of a move to make for the roster that you have.
Yeah, the last bow I'd put on this one too is if it is Superflex, that would have been a good clarification.
Yeah,
here.
Definitely would be important.
Because between Lawrence and Cousins in a 1 QB league, I think you're not getting CJ Stroud, but you're not far off. Now in a Superflex dynasty, CJ Stroud is like a top 5 overall player, and in that case, yeah, maybe I would go and do this because I don't love Trevor Lawrence myself. I don't I mean, I like Metcalf, but I don't know that he's anything that's going to always tilt it for you. So if this is super flex, it gets a lot closer, and I probably actually do push it over just because not only are you helping yourself contend this year, but locking up CJ Stroud for his career in a super flex league is something I want to do. And I'm not opposed to moving Lawrence and Metcalf to do that. So yeah. Whoop. I don't know what happened there. Mo disappeared on me, and now it started to echo. The 3-hour pass out at this point. But guys, thank you again so much. That's the last question I can see on here. So we're going to call this one. I'll probably fire up a couple more drafts solo here. We did get one more coming in. It's King Ahmed. So let's answer this one for you just as we're about to sign off. Hey, get questions in, whatever. We'll keep going. I'm in a 14-man super flex league PPR. Should I trade my 107, 213, and 301 for DJ Moore and 110? Daniel is there, and that's who he wants. I have Dak and Caleb Williams, so I can trade down. I don't think you do this. No. It's a super flex league, and I love Jaden Daniels. I like DJ Moore, but obviously this is a lot more crowded for him moving forward. Rome could become that number one within the next 2 years. And, I mean, you do have Caleb Williams, which is really nice, and you have that. That'd be nice to stack it. You're pretty. I mean, you are good at quarterback right now. I don't know though. I can see this. I do. I guess it's like who are you expecting to be there at 110? Who are you hoping for? I just don't know that I love DJ Moore enough to pull this off. I might just draft Jaden Daniels and stack up. I know you have Dak and Caleb, and then now you have Jaden Daniels, but that's a lot of also guys you could end up moving. I think you can get more is kind of what I'm getting at, more than just DJ Moore and 110. I don't know that I am fully in love with DJ Moore. I like him. I like him long-term. I like that he's still young and doing good things, but I don't love him. So I think you could try to squeeze a little bit more out of him. It's King Ahmed. I know it's another dynasty question for you, Mo. So I don't know if you have it.
No, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page as you. I'm not I don't love the DJ Moore, giving up this just for DJ Moore and moving down a couple of spots. That is my 2 cents. I would definitely take Wolf's opinion a little more, weighted a little bit more. Just I'm no huge dynasty guy, but yeah, I would not be that attached to DJ Moore if I were you. It seems like a bit much. But that is
he adds a little context here. 109's taking a QB, 108 going to choose between Worthy and Brian Thomas. My 110 would be either Thomas and Worthy. So it's kind of like Worthy. So you're getting Worthy and DJ Moore for Jaden Daniels and some draft capital in a pretty interesting class. I don't 213 and 301. I don't know that it is that though. If it was 213 and 301 for DJ Moore and you can do that. See if he'll take that. Jaden Daniel versus those, getting one of those receivers is a pretty big difference in a super flex league, in my opinion. But I also have a very high opinion of Jaden Daniel. It's if it was 213 and 301 and you could do that for DJ Moore, do it. I'd be cool with that. But it's not, because that 107 is pretty damn valuable. And even if you didn't take Jaden Daniel there, I'm guessing, Rome might be already gone, but yeah, I don't know. I have too high of opinion of Jaden Daniels. I don't think you're getting enough.
I would just stick with it and grab Daniels there. But I also I'm very pro Daniels as well. Just the rushing upside, and with Superflex, I mean, he didn't mention if he has a third one other than Dak and Caleb Williams. I mean, yeah, you can always move one of those guys at a later time. I wouldn't pass up the potential of Jaden Daniels just to grab more receiver depth. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah. And I guess the only other question would be how bad are your receivers? If you're truly desperate and you really want to stock up the cabinet here and you already have 2 good QBs, okay. It's not a horrible offer. It's not an immediate reject. I get it, but my leaning, as somebody who has a great stacked roster, and now I'm stuck with like Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers both tearing their fucking Achilles last year, and I have Tyreek Hill and Diggs and Debo, and everything around him is great. I would kill to have two nice young quarterbacks that I know I could feel great about for the rest of my future. So coming from my point of view, I feel like you can always kind of pick these guys out and snipe them in the later rounds at the skill positions. It's very hard to find those cornerstone QBs in a super flex league.
Exactly.
And I think both these guys are really, really special, and Caleb and Jaden Daniels. So I'd be staying put myself, King Ahmed. Good question, though. Very good questions and great questions all around. And last plea here on your way out, guys. If you haven't already, if you pop over to YouTube and hit the sub, help us bump the numbers, or at least pop over and hit that thumbs up button if you're with us on Twitter. Not trying to make you watch somewhere where you don't prefer, but it does really help us grow. Be so appreciated. We're so happy to have you. Over 300 of you with us here watching a 3-hour show. That's, you guys are clearly nuts, and that's what we love. This April drafting and April fantasy chat, a lot of rookie stuff. So I think next week we'll probably look at maybe some of the veteran angles and some of the biggest veteran risers, fallers, in that sense, after talking about the rookie winners and losers. Probably not for 2 hours like the rookie talk.
No.
We go, hey, you never know though. But yeah, so we'll make sure to be back with you next week. I know one of these days, Mo, I'll have to hit you up. I have to work a baseball game. I don't know if it's next Monday or the one Monday after that. So we might have to go later or a different day, but we'll make sure to tweet out, guys, when we're going to be live. So we'll figure it out either way. But most Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be firing up these best ball manias, firing off our shot at $1.5 million. And if you haven't already, sign up on Underdog, use code RSJ or the link in this description, and you can get up to $100 match while supporting your boys with that affiliate link. If you haven't already, you got to join in on the action. It is so much fun. And right now, it's clearly a ripe time with some great ADP values. So get on in at Underdog with code RSJ or the link in the description for $100 matched. And all this content is also at rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves, churning out our post-draft coverage. So check out the website, all our updated rankings, all our stock watches and everything on all these players, churning them out, baby. Otherwise, in a world full of fancy sheep, guys, be that wolf. Best of luck out there in the best ball streets. And until next time, we'll see you then. Whew.